Welcome. Are you guys excited to be here today? Nothing like a party foul and not having your microphone on. If you can hear me in the lobby, you need to stop drinking beer and come on in with the rest of us. Yes, we all see you out there. You guys enjoying your time here tonight? It's been a long day today, and so it's nice to come to a place, get excited about just learning from business leaders, entrepreneurs, and some of our leading thinkers from around the country that are right here localized in the Silicon Valley. So how many business leaders here tonight? Let me just hear it from you. Business leaders, anybody? We got 3 of them here tonight, so that's good. We're pretty excited about that. No, this is the Silicon Valley, so I get a chance to travel the world and see different places, and I always meet people that say, oh yeah, we're from Austin, we're the new Silicon Valley. I'm like, what's your housing price? Oh, okay, you're not really the Silicon Valley, right? Because this is the place where dreams are made until you find out the housing prices, then we send you home. So, but we're excited that you guys are here tonight. We're going to have a great time. We're going to raffle off a Tesla tonight. Oh, did that get canceled? That got canceled? No Tesla? Okay, we're going to raffle off the leftover beer tonight, so you guys can probably just take that home. It's great to go to a conference that serves beer. I think that's probably to your advantage because it makes your business idea sound really good. You know, beer, making business better since Prohibition. So we were going to serve scotch, but we thought, you know, that would really kind of mess you up. So we just went with beer instead. Hey, we're super excited for tonight. And really tonight is designed for the business leader to gain insight into what your business and your business idea, your pitch, working with VCs, and working with your team and leadership. And we designed this conference specifically to bring insight and to grow you as a business leader and to grow your business because we believe that that matters here in the Silicon Valley. That's what makes a difference. It's part of this ecosystem we want to build into your lives. So tonight, we've got some great speakers, great panelists, and some great folks. So let me hear it again. You guys excited to be here? Come on, let the beer sing out. Are you guys excited to be here? All right, thank you. All right, I'm going to bring on our first speaker, and her name is Liz Wiseman. Liz is a leadership executive. She teaches and coaches executives around the world with the Wiseman Group. She's got these kind of just small startup clients. I just want to list a couple of them: Apple, Disney, eBay, PayPal, Facebook, Gap, Google. Not sure if you've heard of them, but just a couple little companies around. But she brings some insight. I first heard her at a leadership conference where she was working through a book called Rookie Smarts. Rookie Smarts is why learning beats knowing in the game of work. Will you guys welcome with me Liz Wiseman?
John, thank you. Okay, who here has heard the term knowledge is power? Yeah, everyone has heard this. I think I first heard this when I joined Oracle. I joined Oracle Corporation when they were just a little startup. And they really liked this idea that knowledge is power because we were this information systems company right at the dawn of the information age. And it just sounded so tough, so powerful, so in control, like knowledge is power. And we liked it so much, it became the mantra for our corporate university. In fact, we liked it so much that we slapped it on a t-shirt. I dug through my drawers to find this t-shirt from several decades ago, and this is the Oracle University logo, and it says knowledge is power. Except it doesn't actually say knowledge is power, it says saperius valeri, which is Latin for knowledge is power. To know is to have value. And see, we put it in Latin because everything just sounds smarter in Latin. And I was actually the person who said, let's make this our mantra, because I was leading Oracle University, and it's how I thought about knowledge for so many years, that it was a source of credibility and power even. But I've come to see this as a potentially, well, an outdated idea and even a potentially dangerous idea. And tonight with you, I want to explore the idea that perhaps there's more power as an entrepreneur, as a leader, there's more power in not knowing. Can we actually get so knowledgeable, so smart, that maybe we're just a little too smart for our own good As my dad used to say, a little bit too big for her britches? Can we get too smart for our own good? Can we get too smart for the good of others? And I want to make a case tonight with you. I want to make a case for the power that comes from not knowing. I'm going to make a case for ignorance. Now, it's not a case for ignorance as in the lack of education or just plain stupidity, but a case for uncertainty. And we're going to look at how does knowledge get in our way. And I want to start first with how it gets in our way as a leader, and then look at how it gets in the way as a professional, as an entrepreneur. What does it blind us to? Now, I joined Oracle back in 1988. One of the things I loved about working with Oracle is I loved how smart everyone around me, and I just felt like I was surrounded by brilliant people, and I became this genius watcher, just fascinated at just the raw intelligence of my colleagues. And I began to see how intelligence was used as this incredible tool for entrepreneurship, for growth, for solving problems, for like banging through walls and just busting through difficult problems. It was this incredible tool for growth. But I also noticed how intelligence can be used as a weapon. Now, is there anyone here who has seen intelligence used as a weapon? Yeah, everyone, to maybe shoot people down. And I noticed a type of leader that I came to call the diminisher, who was really smart but seemed to shut down the intelligence of people around them. You know these people because when they walk in the room, the collective IQ of the team drops. They're like wet blankets on good ideas and innovation. They're energy killers and innovation sappers. And we find that they have this viral and unproductive effect on a team and their intelligence. These leaders that kind of shut down the intelligence of people around them. But I saw a different kind of leader who used intelligence in a very different way. These were the leaders that when they walk into a room, ideas start to flow and problem gets solved. And people say, I felt like I was at my best. Man, was I doing my best work. I was doing hard things. We were like busting down doors. I was exhausted, but I was totally, what would it be? I was exhausted, but totally energized and exhilarated. And we found this really profound difference. We found these diminishers get less than half of people's intelligence. 100% of people's intelligence badges in and walks through the door, but these leaders are only harvesting about half of that intelligence. And what's it like to work for them? That's just plain exhausting, isn't it? These other leaders that I came to call multipliers were leaders who used the intelligence of others. They used their knowledge in such different ways. Diminishers gave directives, and they set direction based on what they knew, what they could see. Whereas multipliers used their knowledge to point to the right challenge, to ask the right question, to establish the right puzzle for the team to jump in and solve. They defined opportunities that caused other people to stretch, and we found that they used virtually all of people's intelligence. And what we found is that most of the diminishing that happens inside of our corporations, be they large companies like Google and Oracle and Apple, or small startups where every brain counts and there's nowhere to hide, we found that most of the diminishing is actually done with the very best of intentions. People who are well-intended leaders, people who read management books, people who write management books, people who go to church, people who really want to bring out the best of others, but sometimes their own knowledge, their own intelligence actually gets in the way, and they become blind to the true genius of people on their team. Sometimes the people who become most blind are the entrepreneurs who feel like this thing rides on their shoulders. They've got to push a boulder up the hill. They've got to set the example for the team. the first question I would really ask you is, are you using all of the intelligence of people around you? Are you using your knowledge to provoke ideas and knowledge and capability and problem solving and innovation in the people around you? Sometimes we become blind to the capability of others. I want us to turn, because our time is short this evening, I want to turn right away to this second question, which is, how does knowledge get in our way as a professional? What do we become blind to? Now, I want to go back to my early days at Oracle. I joined Oracle right out of business school, right out of grad school. I was 24 years old. Company's growing really fast. I'd done a pretty good job in my first few months, maybe the first 12 months, and they said, Liz, we actually need someone to run training for this company. And Larry Ellison, the founder, now still the chairman of Oracle, said, Larry wants a university, so could you go build a university for Oracle? Now, I can assure you, I knew absolutely nothing about how to do this. In fact, my only real qualification for building this university was that I had recently been at a university. And that, I was smart enough to know that any, respectable university needed a logo and a mantra, and that it should be in Latin. And I knew Latin professors at Stanford, so that's about all I had. Now, I actually realized that I didn't know what I was doing, but nobody else seemed to be bothered by this. But it was actually my naivete, the fact that I didn't know how to build said university, that caused me, what would you imagine it would cause me to do? I asked a lot of questions. And I stayed close to all the product leaders and the sales leaders. I stayed close to them, not because I was collaborative and a team player. Why did I stay close to them? I was desperate. Thank you, Stacy, for recognizing. I was just desperate. I didn't know what I was doing, but I thought they might know. So I kept showing up at their staff meeting, learning the business, asking questions. And what I can tell you is you get to do that 1 or 2 times before they expect you to show up with something in your hands. It's like, one of the people who continually shows up for a potluck and brings nothing. At some point, people are on to you. Liz, are you actually going to deliver anything? And so within weeks, we start to deliver, and we deliver fast. And it was our very naivete that caused us to go big and stay exactly on agenda. I took some teasing from the executives who were far more mature than me, certainly in years. And they teased me for being kind of young for this oversized job. And I remember one particular event, it was a cocktail party, it was a reception with Oracle clients, real clients, people who paid big $1 million invoices, and distinguished looking people. And I'm at this cocktail party, and my boss, he introduces me to one of these clients, and he says, this is Liz, she runs Oracle University. And this very distinguished looking man, he kind of he didn't even hide the fact that he was shocked by this, because I'm now 25 years old. And he looks at it and he's like, because he could see that I was just right out of university. And Bob, my boss, he comes swooping in. I'm like, okay, whew, here comes executive air cover. And Bob, with this kind of big smile on his face, seeing what's going on, he just jumps in. He goes, oh, Liz? And I'm waiting for him to say just how smart I was or something. And he goes, Liz, yeah, she's not very well qualified for her job. Okay, so it was one of my first lessons. Don't expect a lot of executive air cover. I'm okay, I see how this goes. I'm going to have to defend myself. So I said the only thing I could think of, which is what was true. And I said, Bob, who wants a job they're qualified for? There'd be absolutely nothing to learn. And Bob gets this even bigger smirk on his face, and it was like he just invisibly said, okay, wish granted, little sweetheart. And then for about a dozen years, I had this steady stream of jobs that I wasn't just underqualified for. I think I was unqualified for these. And just at the time I figured out what I was doing, what happened next? Liz, we have a new job for you. Well, eventually, I started to get good at what I was doing, and eventually, at some point, I remember kind of waking up one day and going, wow, a lot of people come talk to me. People come benchmark. Hey, how do we build a university? How do we do all this? And I actually knew what I was doing. And it felt absolutely, what would you imagine? Felt absolutely, you feel free to shout. I realize we're in a church, but tonight we're gonna shout just a little. And you don't have to raise your hands. We're not gonna pass mics. I mean, you just blurt it out if you got something to say. It felt boring. It felt stale. I'm like, I kind of feel like I'm past my sell-by date. And yeah, but it wasn't funny. I really kind of felt sour by this. And I ended up leaving Oracle, not because I didn't love working there. I left in search of something I didn't know how to do. And as I left, a good friend of mine, he said, Liz, what's the question that you're holding this year? And then my first response was, well, I don't know. I don't really hold questions that long. I try to answer them faster than that. And so I thought, actually there is a question, a burning question that I've been holding for a little while as I was making this transition out. I said, here's my question. I want to know how what we know gets in the way of what we don't know, but need to learn. How is all of this knowledge and skill actually going to be a liability? I decided to study this rigorously because I figured this wasn't just a question for me. This was probably a question for our time. Because we live in a world, see, Silicon Valley's done this to the world. We live in a world where technology has allowed our business cycle to spin so fast that we don't even get to face the same problem twice. So often, we're scurrying around doing best practices for what? That's in the rearview mirror, isn't it? We live in a world, if you work in STEM, science, technology, engineering, math-related fields, I did some calculations at the rate that information is coming at us and considering the rate at which knowledge decays, evaporates, things don't stay true for very long. When you put those two stats together, what I learned is that 15% of what we know is likely to be relevant in 5 years. That's not 50. That's 1/5, between 10 and 20. And here's the kicker on this. We don't actually know which 15% it is. And in this world, it's not what you know that counts, is it? It's how fast you can learn. So my team and I, we studied, and we took about 400 different pieces of work. And we had managers analyze this work, and we looked at how experienced people perform this work and how inexperienced people perform it. And we found that they work in profoundly different ways. Now, obviously, with experience comes knowledge and confidence and credibility and better networks, and our powers of intuition are heightened once we have experience because it gives us more data points for our intuition to work. But experience also comes with a few blind spots. Because what happens once we recognize a pattern? When we've seen something before and our brain goes, pattern recognition, what happens? Is there someone here who can read this for us? And for this, you just have to be literate and loud to do this job for us.
I'll do it over here.
Thank you.
It doesn't matter in what order of the letters in a word appear. The only important thing is that the first and last letter are in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without problem.
Keep going.
Similarly, your mind is reading this automatically without even thinking about it.
Thank you. What happens once we recognize a problem? What happens when we recognize a pattern? Sometimes we miss things altogether. Sometimes we see things that aren't actually there. Or as my teenage son says, he goes, Mom, now you're just making stuff up. Okay? Sometimes the more we know, the less we see. Now, we also studied being inexperienced. Now, being inexperienced, being in what I call rookie mode, it obviously comes with some downsides because we make more mistakes. And in the physical world, this can be a disaster. No one wants a rookie surgeon or dentist. And if you have a child who's in the first year of violin, you know what that recital is going to sound like. But it actually brings with it certain upsides. And to explore this, I want you to think back to the last time, or really any time you were in rookie zone. And what I mean by that is you are doing something that is important and it's hard. And you're doing it for the very first time. For some, maybe the very first church you planted and started. Maybe for others, it's your first startup. Some of you, like I say, us right now, I'm feeling very underqualified for what I'm doing. So you can go back to when you're right out of school or just today. And I want you to think about getting your rookie on. I'm going to ask you to think about this the way that Jim Harbaugh readied the 49ers. This is back in 2013. It's January 2013. Some of you remember this. The Niners, they have just won the divisional playoffs. They're going into the NFC Championship game. They've blown their chances for the Super Bowl in the last couple years. Harbaugh wants a team hungry and humble. He wants them ready. So in addition to practice and film review and all the normal things, he takes an unconventional approach to readiness. When the players finish the last practice, they go into the locker room and each player finds a poster of himself on the locker room. Now, this is Randy Moss, wide receiver for the team at the time. This is not what his poster looked like. You might think that's what the poster would look like. This is the poster that was on his locker. This is his high school senior portrait. Now, I have a kid who's a senior in high school who just took his portrait, so I get exactly how immature they are at this stage. And, he's asking them to go back in place and time when they're playing the game for just the love of the sport. They're playing it not because they have a contract or agents or fans. Their biggest fans are mom and dad at this point. And one of the defensive tackles for the team, he said it was so clear what coach wanted. He wanted us to grind and play the way we did in high school. So I want you to get your rookie on for just a second and think back to it. I'm going to ask you a question. When you were in this space, underqualified for a big job, how did you feel? Confident or anxious? How did you operate? Big, bold risks or little baby steps? Yeah, carefully. We often think we have this romanticized view of newcomers. We're like, oh, they're big, bold risk takers. Not true at all. We find the only time we're big, bold risk takers in this rookie space is when we don't actually realize we're taking a risk. It's just a dumb risk. Like me with my first book, I'm like, well, that can't be that hard. I'll give it a try. But mostly we're little tiny steps, feeling our way in the dark. What did you do when you didn't know what to do? Make it up or go ask for help? And what was your aspiration? Make something sophisticated and amazing or just keep it simple? Keep it simple. Keep it simple. We find in this rookie mode, when we're sort of at the bottom of a really steep learning curve, we operate in some really interesting ways, what I call backpacker mode, unencumbered by knowledge and assumptions, hunter-gatherer mode. We actually bring in more expertise when we don't know what we're doing. Why? Because we're desperate. We don't have answers, so we go out and we find them, and we search, we query, we end up mobilizing expert networks, sort of bringing more expertise to bear on a problem. We operate in what I call firewalker mode. Extremely cautious, but very quick, because we need to put some points on the board. And we operate in this pioneering kind of frontiersman mode, scrappy and lean and agile, keeping things simple. When I looked at this data, I could only conclude that the way we operate when we're new to something, underqualified, a rookie, is the way so many organizations are trying to get their workforce to operate. Agile, lean, little steps, asking for feedback, open. We ask better questions, we find better answers when we don't quite know what we're doing. Now, we also found this very interesting relationship. When we did this survey of working professionals, as I say that, I realize they're probably not non-working professionals. We did this survey, we asked people a number of questions, including how challenged are you in your work and how satisfied? And what we found is that as challenge level goes up, so does satisfaction. And it's not quite because we know what we're doing. It's not because we love it. It's because somebody has given us a stretch challenge, one that's uncomfortable, one that's put us off kilter, out of balance. And how long can you stay off balance, out of kilter, coming into work every day not knowing what you're doing? How many days do you get like that? Not too many, because we can't stand it. It's this tension that causes us to move forward, to solve the problem. It's the quest for competence that actually drives us to do amazing things when we're in this zone. We find that when we linger too long on a plateau, people say a little part of them starts to die. Sometimes people say, I begin to resent my job. But when we step out into this liminal space where we're a little bit afraid, not knowing what we're doing, people say, I feel alive. Sometimes people say, I feel divine. For me, this is where I feel God's presence in my life. And sometimes in this place of not knowing, I think it's actually where we come to know God. And it's in our place of weakness that we end up finding this amazing strength. So how do you, and maybe our final question, how do you escape the knowledge trap? How do you lead in a way that you don't become blind to the capabilities of others and that you don't become blind to the possibilities around you? Let me share a few ways that we can do this. I'm going to share 4, maybe 5. The first is, I think the most profound shift that a leader can make is shifting out of the mode of having answers and operating in the mode of questions. Asking the questions that focus the energy and intelligence of your team. You know, some of you may have taken what I call the extreme question challenge. Could you lead a meeting? Could you lead a conversation? Could you solve a problem if all you had was a question? I want to issue this challenge to you to lead something by only asking. Now, some of you may try this at home tonight with your kids, getting your kids in bed. This is where I first tried this challenge. It changed my life. I found that my kids didn't need me telling them what to do. They needed me to ask an intelligent question. Now, some of you who may try this at work may find that not only does it change your role, it changes the life of the people around you. As people around you step up, find answers, take accountability, and solve problems. So maybe you make that shift. Some of you might want to admit what you don't know. One of the most courageous acts of leadership I saw at Oracle, I was working on this strategy project with the president, the chief technology officer, the chief financial officer. Our idea was simple. The executives were going to architect the strategy, present the strategy to groups of our executives from around the world, present it to them, kind of pat them on the butt, send them back out on the field to execute. And we thought it was a brilliant idea. It turned out it didn't go very well because we brought in the executives. We shared the strategy with them, and they said, you know, that's great, but we don't see a very clear strategy. We're like, okay, well, clearly we need to rearrange the PowerPoint slides, and it will be more compelling if we do. So we did that, and we did it the second time, and that didn't go very well. So we changed the fonts. And we brought a third group back together, and we got the same feedback. You know, we don't see a clear and compelling strategy. I'm with these 3 top executives afterward, and they're getting really quiet as I go through the feedback with them just one more time. And that's when the CFO, he blurted out, he goes, Liz, you know, you can stop beating us up. You can stop beating us up. And I'm thinking, well, actually, I was having a little bit of fun doing that, but okay. And he goes, we get that there's a problem. We understand it. We just don't know how to do this. And I'm thinking, I wonder what it is he doesn't know how to do. Communicate the strategy? And he goes, no, he goes, we've never run a $25 billion company before. This is new to us. See, if you're in a growth organization, every day you're underqualified for your job. He's like, we've never done this before. We don't know how to set a strategy for a company this complex. And then he just blurts in, he goes, Liz, if you could figure out, like if you could help us figure out how to do this, that would be useful. See, I didn't realize in fast times everybody's winging it, particularly the people at the top of the organization. Maybe the most courageous thing you can do as an entrepreneur, as a leader, is tell people, here's what I don't know, and I'm trying to find answers for. I think we've got maybe time for just one last one. Maybe you name the genius of the people on your team. Instead of sharing your knowledge, you look for the genius, the native genius of the people around you. I'm a mom. I have 4 kids, and 3 of them have this wonderfully healthy, boisterous sense of adventure. Like they love roller coasters and going to new places and trying new foods. And then I've got my 4th child. He's the 17-year-old. Now this kid is different than the other. If they're over here on sense of adventure, this kid is like all the way over here. This is a kid who was born without a sense of fear. This is a kid who thinks, see it, climb it, figure out how to get down once you're at the top. A kid who thinks, think it, make it, clean up the mess, absolutely never. He makes constant messes throughout our house, just taking whatever he needs from the house for one of his creations. This is one of his, like a man fort that this little kid built when he was like 15. It's got all of our stuff. We can never find anything. This is not the problem. This frustrates us. The problem is where this thing is. So this was actually on top of our roof for 2 months before I even discovered it there. It wasn't until I was looking for the camping cot that and so as his mother, it's very easy for me to see him as, now fill in the blank for me. It's very easy for me to see him as crazy. Now keep going, because that's generous. It's easy for me to see him as defiant, thank you, keep going. Rebellious, thank you, you're good at this, Andy. Disobedient.
We have one.
You have one.
2. We have 2.
Yeah, and it's very easy for me to see him as an accident waiting to happen, a disaster in the making. And about 2 years ago, I decided I would see my son differently, that I would only see his brilliance. And I have come to see him so differently. I now see him as, Andy, complete this. I see him as brilliant, beautiful, wonderful, an innovator, fearless and bold and creative, a problem solver. Not too long ago, I came home. I was gone one night. I come home, and he's got this big smile on his face. It's a smile he saves for Mom. And it's when he's done something kind of, And he says, Mom, I banged my leg on the coffee table. I split it open. And I'm like, I didn't get a text from Dad. And he pulls up his pant and he shows me this. Yeah, that right there. Maybe you can't see it. And he goes, Mom, I stitched myself up. What? That's exactly what I was thinking. But my first reaction was so short because I'm thinking, what a knucklehead. But so instantly I went, how brilliant and how cost effective for you to have saved us $5,000 in the emergency room. And my friend who's a surgeon looked at it and said, man, he actually did a pretty good job at this. So maybe you see the genius of the people on your team. Here's what I want to end with. What I have found, strangely, what I know is that we're actually at our best when we don't really know, when we're uncertain, when we're inquiring, when we're discovering, when we're on the outer edge of what we know how to do. Let me share with, and you know what, it's also I found that not only do we do our best work here, it's where we tend to find our greatest joy. It's exhausting but totally exhilarating. This is Zia. She is 10 at the time. She has a GoPro camera on her head. She is in Park City, Utah on the ski team. She is on top of the 40-meter ski jump. Now, this girl has done the 20 before. This is her first attempt at the 40. Just watch this with her. Who's willing to work on the outer edge of what they know how to do. You know, in today's reality, we're all rookies. The only real question is, are we going to operate with rookie smarts? If you want your team to stay relevant, you know, your job as a leader is to set the stretch, to lead them into the unknown, into that uncomfortable place where you don't have answers, and to let them move towards you. You know, if you really want to lead your team big, you know, and go big as a leader, you've got to remain a learner, because the best leaders are perpetual rookies. They know when to draw on the wisdom of experience and knowledge, And then they know when to step over here and maybe to the outer edge, and they know when to get their rookie on. Because right now, it's not what we know that counts, it's how fast we can learn. John, back to you.
All right, let's give it up for Liz. That was outstanding, right? Rookie smarts. That was brilliant. Just a real quick note, as you saw the house that was the tent that was on top of Liz's house, she's actually renting that out for about $4,000 a month. So just make things available for you guys if you're looking for a space. Oracle University, that was great. It was good that it wasn't like PG&E University, like PU, that'd be bad, or Facebook University. I don't even want to go there. But we're excited. So the next piece of what we're doing is a VC panel. We want to get into really the underbelly of just some of the things that venture capital looks for in leadership, in entrepreneurs, and working with people in business. I'm going to invite Andy Wood. Andy Wood is one of the rising stars of leadership in this area. As he's launched this church, he's going to go into a talk after that. But we're going to get some, we're going to go to Sadie Hawkins after this.
Yes. I'm quite embarrassed that I dressed like a 60-year-old man tonight. But anyways, we'll leave it at that.
Uh-oh.
I'm sorry, 52, excuse me. So
you want to look this good when you're 52.
I
Let's
do,
just say
yes.
it right there. So anyway, I was saying something about some guy that I don't really like anymore. But we really want to get into really what venture capital is looking for and understanding their mode of identifying leaders, the energy of your idea, and getting behind those things. So please welcome my former friend Andy Wood, and he'll share with us tonight.
And if you're wondering, I'm not a venture capitalist, but I do like them. They're great people. And tonight we're gonna introduce to you a couple of men who are in the VC world and are killing it. I know there are women that are killing it as well in the VC world, but today we have two men here, and they're going to share with us from their perspective what they look for in entrepreneurs, their heartbeat, and how they're leveraging their platform to make a difference, to echo a message here on planet Earth. So if you guys will welcome Luke Rausch and Ben Shelf to the stage. They're going to share the secrets with us, and then they're going to be waiting afterwards for pitches from any entrepreneurs that are here. That was a joke. But so, hey guys, welcome to the stage. And we're so glad to have you with us tonight to carve time out of your busy schedules. I just want to start with kind of a just curiosity for me that I always have. You know, I've watched the show Silicon Valley before. And I'm just curious, like, how accurate that is in terms of venture capitalists. And what does a venture capitalist do? Like, when you wake up in the morning, what's your day look like? Tell us a little bit more of the behind the scenes of what it means to be a venture capitalist.
All right. Well, I find that show to be shockingly real. And so, you know, is it perfect? No. But I do think the writers did their homework, and I appreciate that a lot. What is the job? Well, I'm actually a rookie. This is my first year as a venture capitalist. And so I'm figuring out what that means, and I'm learning a lot. But the day-to-day is, as you might expect, it's learning about new products, learning about new technologies, meeting really interesting, smart people who are doing amazing things and have amazing vision for what the world could be like if their product could just get funded or get into the market. And you know, that's why it's so exhilarating to be a venture capitalist, is you have that day-to-day.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's an accurate show. It's scary. As partners, we laugh about it all the time just because we see companies that we've invested in that resemble, you know, things that are going on. But I think the day-to-day, venture capital is about a people business. It's about relationships. It's about getting to know folks. It's about having some perspective on what you think is going to be the reality in the future, and then trying to make investments. But it's mostly about just getting to know folks and you know, building trust. It's about looking at new ideas, and it's mostly just about identifying the right people to invest capital into.
That's great. And tell us a little bit more. So let's start with you, Ben. Tell us about how you got into the world, your company that you lead, and some of the investments that you guys are doing right now. Talk about your journey there a little bit, and then where you're at today.
Yeah, so I'm very much a Silicon Valley cliche. I moved to sunny California 20 years ago to go to Stanford. I studied computer science. I dropped out of Stanford. I started a software company. I sold a software company. I started another company that crashed and burned, and then suddenly I found myself as a venture capitalist. So, it's probably a story you've heard many, many times out here. And, I look at it as really just taking that one baby step forward each day, each week, each month. There wasn't a plan when I was in school. I didn't think I'm going to be a venture capitalist someday. So very much an accident that I'm here.
But you made it. You've arrived.
We'll see. I'm still a rookie.
I took one computer science class in college and almost failed. So
that was
I'm
the
an
next best
unusual,
option.
But no, I actually started out a somewhat unusual road. I started out in big companies and spent the first 7 or 8 years of my career working for larger companies, and then was an entrepreneur a couple times over, and got to know a couple of guys, and we started our firm 4 years ago. So, and I just moved actually here, so I don't know too much about Silicon Valley yet, but I lived overseas for the last 5 years doing what we do in Asia, and then just came back. So I'm
Awesome.
still getting acclimated.
And you're in more the medical arena. Talk a little bit more about the products that you guys are interested in investing in right now.
So my background is with Boston Scientific, and then in surgical robotics and minimally invasive surgery. So we like to invest in medical devices, medical technologies. We're not a big fund, so we don't do much biotech stuff because it just gets too expensive too quick. So we focus more on medical devices, minimally invasive surgery stuff.
Cool. And Ben, you're doing some stuff in media now, right?
I was previously.
Okay. So your investment specialty now at this point is?
We're a very early stage fund.
Okay.
So we're trying to be first money into a company. And what that means is we keep much more off of the people than we do the market. So you look at our portfolio, it's all over the map. But if you look at the characteristics of our founders, there's a lot more similarity there.
Okay, so let's bridge into that. When you guys meet with an entrepreneur or a team of folks, talk through like the top few characteristics that you're trying to spot when an entrepreneur walks in the room and you have that first conversation.
We like a blend of real confidence and belief in what they're doing, but also some level of humility and ability to kind of take feedback and sort of listen to other perspectives.
So will you like interrupt them in the middle of the meeting and just be like, "Nah, that part of your idea sucks," or how do you broach that?
We, from time to time, if we think that there may be like some kind of an ego problem, then we'll do that. But generally, we try not to play games. Just more kind of let them finish, and then just I like to see how they interact with the other people. So just piggybacking off something that was said earlier, I think that to the extent that the leader empowers the other people around them, it tells us that they're more confident in their role and don't need to kind of be the one talking all the time.
So whenever the pitch is made, you want to see them come with other people, or do you want to see them come by themselves, or does that not really matter that much?
The initial pitch, I think sometimes it's just kind of a one-on-one discussion, but their ability to articulate their idea quickly and clearly is important. But then pretty quickly, I want to see who else is on the team. The companies that we've had trouble with that are usually kind of a one-man band or one-woman band, we look for a more broad-based leadership team.
Okay. How about for you, Ben? When you have that meeting, how quickly do you feel like? Now, based upon what Liz said, you might not want to say how quickly you make an assessment, but do you? And I guess that would be for more experienced venture capitalists to quickly make it. You're a rookie venture capitalist, so you can make a quick assessment, and it's more accurate than a veteran, right? Because they have the blind spots, right?
Maybe, I don't know. It's as short as 5 minutes. Sometimes you know in 5 minutes. I think sometimes, from what my partners tell me, it takes 5 years to figure out whether you were right or wrong, right? But I think we tend to craft a picture around an opportunity, that being the founding team and the idea, over the course of a couple of weeks, right? That's the normal timeline.
Have there ever been any opportunities that you guys have passed up that you later regretted?
Yeah, we keep a record of like our greatest misses. We have our greatest hits, and then we have our greatest misses. That's a longer list. So we've missed some. Yeah, we've ended up missing some.
So what did you learn from what you missed? I'm sorry, I'm going off on I'm off script on the questions, but you guys are so brilliant.
Yeah, well, so we've learned to trust our gut more on individuals and just bet on people. So if we really like the person that walks through the door, even if their idea is kind of like, nah. We've learned to go with that. there's some really awesome ideas that we bet on where the people were kind of like, nah, and it doesn't. B players cannot make an A idea happen.
That's great. So what would you add, Ben, to the characteristic of humility and confidence?
Well, I would definitely add a second check mark behind humility. That is probably the top of our list. They have to be able to listen well. They have to be teachable. And you'll find that these people will also have a tremendous amount of confidence. But that combination of humility and confidence is so key. And then the other thing I would really add there is they have to be inspiring. And inspiration, inspiration comes in a lot of different ways. Some people are the charismatic, stand on the stage and preach it to the thousands of people, kind of inspiring. But sometimes for certain kinds of businesses, a really strong intellect is important. Sometimes it's a really strong sales acumen that's really important. So you have to be inspiring in the correct way for the thing you're trying to build.
Yeah.
I would also add we listen pretty early on for kind of the why someone's doing what they're doing. So Simon Sinek did a great piece on kind of the why we do what we do, and we think that's really important. So the great entrepreneurs that we interact with have a real deep sense of purpose and motivation and stewardship around the idea that they're chasing. And that's compelling to other people that they try to recruit, and it's compelling for us.
That's great. And okay, so now for you, Ben, going from an entrepreneur to your new role as a venture capitalist, talk about how your perspective as a venture capitalist is shaped by your experience as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think the biggest way is I'm looking for people who want to have that same kind of entrepreneurial experience that I've had. It's like, we're all pattern matchers, right? That's kind of the job, is you have to see a lot of decks, you see a lot of people, and so on. And so I've had, successes, failures, and whatnot, and been at various stages in startups. And so I'm kind of looking for the people who, I can pattern match and say, oh, that's a lot like the first engineer I hired here, or that's a lot like that first sales or marketing person that we hired there. And, what were the strengths and weaknesses of that person? And so I think it's just the combination of my 15 years as an entrepreneur has led me to be able to bucket people relatively quickly.
Yeah, that's good. How about the tension that, if you think about a venture capitalist and an entrepreneur, and the tension of how much does the VC drive the agenda versus letting the entrepreneur kind of roll with things, and that tension in the relationship. Like you said, you want somebody that's coachable, teachable, and trainable, but being on the other side of it as an entrepreneur, I'm sure that felt different when they're looking at you, assessing your teachability, but you've got this great idea that you're very convinced needs to be implemented. So talk about that.
Yeah, I would say the VC influence in terms of the way a company is run or how that is put into the market should be pretty much zero. If you're doing your job, you are coaching. One of our founders calls us the founder consigliere. We're an advisor. We're there. We're the first phone call you make when something's gone wrong. But the entrepreneur is running the show. The entrepreneur is and the venture capitalist is really just there to backstop and empower what is in mind. And there are times when it doesn't go well, and stuff happens, and you have to correct course. But really, that's the job of the board of directors, as separate from the venture capitalist, which oftentimes there's overlap there.
Yeah.
But
that's good. So does that always happen, or would you say there's I don't know if large is the right word, but there's a percentage of venture capitalists that are more in the weeds on things?
Yeah, I don't know for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think, so different types, different strokes for different folks. Later stage investors tend to be less involved operationally because they're investing in more mature companies.
Yeah.
For really early stage stuff, then I think that there's a tendency to need to get a little bit more involved with helping the entrepreneur to think through strategy, helping to be a sounding board, helping to place key talent, helping to find other investors to sort of bet on the company. So I think there's some sort of sliding scale for sort of earlier stage investors need to be more involved. Later stage investors can be less involved.
Yeah, and don't mistake involvement for control, right? I think being involved is very important as that support role, especially in the early stages.
Yeah, we want to focus our time on strategy and on leadership.
Yeah.
If leadership's right and we're generally kind of on the same page with strategy, then we want to stay out of operations. So kind of we talk about noses in, fingers out. And so we want to be sniffing around if something's wrong.
Yep.
But we don't want to have our fingers in kind of day-to-day stuff. And yeah.
That's good. And I would be curious to flip it. Like, so from an entrepreneur standpoint, one of the benefits that both of you guys have is your experience, right? So you guys have tremendous amounts of wisdom that an entrepreneur can leverage to grow their company. So you want that relationship where it's a yin and a yang, and they're asking you questions. But what would you say to the entrepreneurs that are here? Like, what should they look for in a venture capitalist? Like the things that they should run from when they're not just making a pitch, but they're assessing the relationship between them and the VC.
I would say definitely look at the network. A lot of this job is being able to connect the entrepreneur with key relationships, whether it be for hiring or for sales or whatnot. So look at the network. Also look at the size of the portfolio. These are long-term relationships. Is this just a random person who's going to write a check and you're never going to hear from? Or is there legitimately a relationship that you can build with this person for the long haul, which is going to be beneficial for this company, the next company, and so on? So I think those are a couple of things I'd be looking at.
That's great.
Yeah, I think it depends. I think it depends on your assessment as the entrepreneur of what you need the most. And depending on what you need, that should probably direct who you end up raising capital from. And so some people need access to more capital. Some people need access to industry relationships. Some people need access to technical expertise. Some people need access to, product people. So it kind of depends. But I think it's important to not just chase brands, but also to chase, the right relationship, because you end up spending a lot of time together. And if you don't really like the person, really like hanging out, or really feel like they can contribute, it gets painful.
Yeah, that's good. And so piggybacking on that, what would you say are some of the landmines that entrepreneurs should watch out for in those relationships? Like you guys are trustworthy men of character and integrity.
Of course, yeah.
100%.
Yeah, I think one of the things we talk about at our firm is that the cap table is the window into the entrepreneur's soul. And you can learn a lot from the way that an entrepreneur structures the stock in their company. I think similarly, you can learn a lot from a venture capitalist about the way they structure term sheets and the documentation that comes when you actually want to consummate a deal with them. You can look at the negotiation process. There's a big indicator. Are they, people of character? Are they trying to pull stuff off, and I think the top venture capitalists aren't by any stretch, but there's a large swath.
Yeah,
we spend a fair amount of time just trying to coach entrepreneurs towards making sure they've got good, clean terms. So they may not like the price, and the pre-money valuation that we put on deals is usually a lot different than what others will put on it, but our term sheets are clean. And when we say we're going to close, we close. And we wire the money on time. We don't fool around. We try to make sure that once a deal's done, that we're on the same side of the table as the entrepreneur. And if you have funky terms in deals, you end up in situations downstream where things kind of go sideways. You end up on opposite sides of the table, and it doesn't feel like your oars are in the water paddling in the same direction. So I agree with what Ben said on that.
That's really good. And okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. You assess an entrepreneur. They come in. You're like, okay, we're going with them. Talk about that first round, and how do you make that decision how much you're going to invest in the first round?
So that really depends on the kind of company and the founding team and what that company needs. It's kind of like saying, well, I'm going to buy a car. How much should I spend on a car? You could spend a very little amount on a car. You could spend a tremendous amount of money on a car, and it just kind of depends on the feature set of the car and the brand. And so I think it's similar in, maybe it's not the best analogy, but there are some companies that can be built on a shoestring. For $10,000, $20,000, you can get a lot of progress. I always encourage entrepreneurs. I'm surprised by the number of times I've asked this year to an entrepreneur, why are you raising money? It's just clear that they don't actually need to raise money to accomplish a huge milestone for their organization.
Could you give a couple examples of that?
I think the best example from one of the pitches I saw is it was a team of 3 founders, 2 engineers and a product guy. They were all fairly young, so personal burn rate was low. They were paying reasonably cheap rent, as much as that is possible around here, and they had already created some product that was in the market, and so they were raising money because they thought, well, we need to hire a few more engineers. And a lot of time that's I hear that a lot. It's like, oh, we just need to hire a couple more people. Sometimes this is absolutely true, but a lot of times that's just a reflex because we're here in the Valley and we think of a funding event as a huge milestone for the company. I'm much more interested in non-funding event milestones for companies. And these guys, they had a product. They were getting more and more customers week in and week out. They were essentially self-sufficient. It's not like they were running out of cash. And so I basically told them, look, continue to grow your customer base. In 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, you'd be amazed at how different the terms would be if you just waited. And part of that is a page from my own book. When I started my first company, we ran around town. We got a couple term sheets. We thought it was crazy. The pre-money valuations were so low because, when you're the entrepreneur, that's what you think. And we actually decided to pass. And we bootstrapped our company for about 5 years. And of course, when you have 75 people and 15 million in revenue, and then you go out for funding, that's a very different conversation when you're a couple of guys out of Stanford. So I always have my eye towards, what does the entrepreneur really need in a funding round? And are they raising money because that's what we do? Or are they raising money for a particular need?
That's good. So one more, drilling down a little bit more into that. So are there some benchmarks that you look for in terms of specifically around staffing? So you said my primary concern is, are they going to go hire $200,000 a year engineers that they don't need, right? That adds up really quickly. So are there some baselines that you're looking for scalability with the organization? Like revenue to employee or anything that we can hold on to?
Yeah, it's never quite that simple. I think that's, at least there's not a formula that we apply like that.
Yeah.
It's each situation is unique, and if you're building a new kind of microprocessor, that's going to cost a tremendous amount of money compared to if you're building an app, for example. So, and some types of software solutions require, a team of, artificial intelligence experts or machine, or computer vision experts, and then you're looking at a very certain type of hire, and so you have to budget for that. And so I think it's more of a conversation with the entrepreneur. Okay, what's the hiring plan? Who do you need to execute to get a product to, the first 10 customers, first 100 customers, or whatever it's going to be, and that's how you work into a reasonable plan for what would be an appropriate burn for this kind of company, and therefore how much money do you need to raise at this particular stage?
That's great.
Yeah, I think it's mostly about just financing value inflection points. So what are the things that are going to create value in your company other than financing events? Because financing events aren't value inflection points. And so ideally you want to finance just past, or enough to sort of hit that value inflection point and then have enough time to raise money. You want to finance to that. Otherwise, you're giving away more of your company than you need to. So the idea of sort of multi-year sort of financings, in very rare circumstances, so I think that makes sense. So you want to get sort of the minimum amount of capital that you can into the company, so that it can be your company and not the investor's company, and then you can make a bunch of progress and raise more.
I think that's a really good point, that it's your company and not the investor's company. One of the things we look at is how much capitalization will this company need eventually, and will it, under the normal growth of a successful startup, will the founders retain enough equity so that it's still meaningful for them at an exit, either an IPO or a liquidity event? Because if it's not, then now you're getting into a dangerous place where the incentives aren't aligned, and the founders, if they don't end up with enough of the company and it's all investor owned, then there's no person who's running the company who cares about the exit a tremendous amount.
Yeah. That's good. Okay, I'm going to switch our conversation a little bit as we wrap up our time. I know for both of you guys, what you do with being a VC, it's a platform for a lot more than just investing in companies. But you guys are wanting your lives to truly make a difference here on planet Earth. And you're taking what's in your hands and you're leveraging it. So talk about how you see your role as more than just a financial investor, but somebody who really is trying to do good on planet Earth and change the world.
Yeah, so we focus a fair amount of our diligence just on what is the impact that this entrepreneur can have in his or her community, and what does that look like in terms of loving your neighbor, as sort of one principle. And so we invest here in the U.S. We also invest in Asia, and we think that there's a way to be very focused on all the business KPIs that anybody else would want to focus on, but also have a perspective and then figure out how to intertwine impact things in terms of what's the role that you have to play and the impact that you can have and the witness you can have in your with your partners, vendors, customers, employees, and everybody else that's in your ecosystem, and what that looks like in terms of human impact within your staff and with surrounding staff is something that we focus on. We got a whole bunch of metrics about how we think about that, but how an entrepreneur processes that mission that they're on is really important to us, and sort of why they're doing what they're doing, which is something I alluded to earlier, super important.
Yeah. Do you feel like when you meet with an entrepreneur, you can pretty quickly tell if they're in it for the right reasons, like within a few minutes of the conversation?
Yeah, I think it's harder to discern whether they're really in it for the right reasons now versus like 3 or 4 years ago. Because now I think that it's expected that everybody's got like a CSR slide, and so it takes us a little bit longer now than it used to be able to discern, is this just sort of like a plug and play slide that they stuck in there because it's like something that everybody does, or is it actually really hardwired into sort of who they are and who they feel called to be? So
that's awesome.
We look for personal stories from their past as kind of an indicator of to pattern match on whether or not this is for real. You can tell if it's coming from the heart.
Yeah. That's good.
We also we usually will meet, so this is why it's important for us to meet the rest of the team. When you meet the rest of the team, then we'll usually find some kind of an excuse to I'm married, and if the founder's married, we'll go out, let's take our wives to dinner. You get a sense when you sort of hang out with the people that are closest to them, how they're wired.
Yeah. Spouses don't really lie a whole lot in that sense. You kind of...
And they got to be bought in as well. That's very
seriously.
important.
Yeah.
I think on the, what is the bigger platform of this job, I think we're just kind of at the tip of the iceberg with respect to what technology is going to do for humanity. We've been kind of playing around for say 50 or 60 years between chips and software and then the internet, and now we're actually starting to realize some of the promise of what technology could do to vastly accelerate the way that our lives are lived and the convenience and all these things. And so that fact married with the fact that successful entrepreneurs, the 10-year-olds now who will be 20 and 25-year-olds in a decade who are going to start these companies that are going to just do things that blow all of our minds, it will be lonely for them. This will be an interesting journey as they climb to the top, and it's the next generation of Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg and et cetera, et cetera. And I think for me, one of the things that is intriguing to me about being in this role is getting the opportunity to serve those people, to be the advisor, the trusted, the friend, when it gets crazy, when it gets however, and to just serve them and love them as a lot of other people might not do, because these are people who will be in a position where everybody's going to want to say yes to them. But if you establish that relationship early on, I think that's the way that you're going to, I'm going to have the most ability to do some good in the world.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I agree with that. The other thing I'd say is, so we have, our firm has 2 offices, one here in Silicon Valley and then another one in Southeast Asia. And one of the trends that we think is interesting, I think it ties into something that Ben said earlier, but the opportunity for 2 billion members of the emerging middle class that represent $15 trillion in purchasing power that join the consumption group of demographic globally. It's the most interesting demographic shift of our generation. And there are a lot of technologies that are being birthed here, medical technologies and IT and consumer products that are birthed here but that are relevant there. Yeah. And so we are big believers in sort of the interchange of ideas and technologies and devices and other things that can go and play there, and things that may be born there that can play here. So that's a big opportunity, and there's a commission that comes with that that's really important.
Yeah. Well, I just want to personally say thank you to you guys. I know that you have super busy lives, and for you to spend an evening with us. And I know I've just gotten to know you, Luke, but we've had a lot of conversations, Ben, and just to hear your heart and to see that you really are trying to make a difference with your life, and to know that you see it as a stewardship, or you see it as an opportunity to use what's been placed in your hands to make the world a better place. And we need more people like you guys here on planet Earth. And so thank you guys for honoring us with your time tonight. Will you guys thank them?
Thanks for
Give it up for
having
them.
us.
Hey, this is a time of the night where some people have to go pee and some people don't. So everybody, if you could just stand up for just a quick second, stretch out a little bit, take a deep breath, breathe in, turn to somebody on your left, say, hey, good to see you, neighbor. And you're right, tell them, say, hey, you look good. You look good. Did you lose some weight? Ask them if they lost some weight. Last time I saw you, you look different. Should I use that? Looks like everybody leveraged that opportunity for the restrooms. We're going to put a clock on the schedule that says 3 minutes, and 3 minutes we'll all be back seated here, okay? Ready? See you in 3 minutes.
On the map when your allies and your tribes are telling you to leave me. They won't see my plan of attack, cause this is our fight. Love is not the enemy. Everything that you kill me, somehow it makes me feel alive. So take the gun on your body, you can be my Clyde. I know that you feel the same, so paint it on your face and baby let the world see. Too late to leave these walls. This castle's been surrounded. Won't stay to watch it fall around us. Bring the big guns out, shoot now. I'll make the drums beat harder for you. Red on the clouds, bleed out. I rub the colors on my face to prove. I sing it like, oh, watch it put more paint on, more paint on. Watch it put more paint on, more paint on.
right, you guys enjoying your time so far? Okay, thank you for enjoying your time right here. You brought a beer in, that's good. If you can hear my voice in the lobby, we're getting started again. Hey, I just wanted to, did anybody else notice that the new set design here reminds me a lot of that TV show on Netflix called Stranger Things? Anybody else watching that show? I binged watched all 8 episodes one night. So now I come here and I'm a little terrified. So, did anybody else watch that show, or am I the only one? I don't think I am. Yeah, it's a good show. It's a good show to get your wife to cuddle up next to you, because she was scared. Hey, this has been a great chance for us. Really, this is like drinking from a fire hose or a beer hose, whatever. But we just want to be able to dive deep into this conversation about leadership, about character, about entrepreneurialism, about funding, and all the pieces that go with that. It's also a chance for you to connect with one another. So as you meet people and find somebody in the lobby or hanging out, just exchanging information and allowing that collaborative space to happen. I'm going to continue on. Again, if you're in the lobby, you can hear my voice. Come on in. We're going to continue on to our next session, and it's called the Leadership Ladder. And Andy Wood, again, the founding entrepreneurial kingdom leader right here at this church, is going to just walk through some leadership principles. Will you guys welcome with me Andy Wood?
Well, it's such a joy for us to have you guys here with us today. And I know that so many of you who are entrepreneurs and leaders, you are so busy. And the fact that you're willing to take time out of your busy schedules, we are so grateful for that. And my passion for leadership and entrepreneurship began at a very young age. My dad was and is a business owner. In fact, my dad started a business the year that I was born. And I watched him with this entrepreneurial gene that many of you have. He was always starting stuff. It was just like a new business idea every single week. And if you grew up in an entrepreneur's home, or you are an entrepreneur, you know that like every so often you feel like you're on cloud 9 and everything's great, and then the next week the world's falling apart. And to this day, when I have conversations with my dad on the phone, I'm like, how's business? And he's like, oh my gosh, it's unbelievable. We just sold several $100,000 deal. And then the next week I'll talk and he'll say, the world is falling apart. Half my employees left last week. So it's back and forth. And I remember as a young child watching my dad as this incredible entrepreneur, but struggling with leadership. And he would grow the organization and they would come back to size, and it would grow and it would come back to size. And as a result of that, I grew a passion for leadership with entrepreneurship. And I became a geek on leadership. I since the age of 16, have read just about anything that I can get my hands on if it has anything to do with leadership. And I love reading Liz Wiseman's books. If you guys loved her talk, would you just give her a hand for being here with us today? And what I have seen as a leader is that whenever a leader grows and gets better, everybody around them wins. Their family wins, their office at work wins, their friends get better as a result of that. So when you increase as your capacity grows, it has an impact on every single person that your life touches. And that's a great thing. So we want to grow in our skills, in our capacity, in our knowledge, in our wisdom, in our competencies as a leader. The leadership ladder. That's what I want to talk to you about for a few moments together. And many of us give a great bulk of our life, our energy, our passion to trying to climb this entrepreneurship or leadership ladder. And there are a lot of people in Silicon Valley that have climbed the ladder and are climbing the ladder. In fact, I heard a really interesting story, some of you may be familiar with it, about a woman who back in the year 2003, which is a great year. 2003 is the year that my wife and I got married, and it's just evidence that God does exist, that she would say yes to me. And so that was the year that we said yes, and that was also the year that a woman by the name of Elizabeth Holmes said yes to a vision that she had in her heart. Anybody ever heard of her before? And nobody's heard of her. I thought some entrepreneurs would have heard of her. Well, she started this business, and it was the next biggest thing. It was going to revolutionize how medical the medical world operated. She was going to change the way people's blood was tested. It was going to happen faster. You were going to get it on your phone. It was just going to be unbelievable. And she went out and she raised all this money. In fact, there were tremendous amounts of cash invested, over $700 million invested in this business. And she was touted as like the female Steve Jobs, or the queen of Silicon Valley. There were all these articles written about her, and her business was growing. She was all the way to $9 billion in net worth. She was like at the top of the leadership ladder. And that's really scary to see my face behind me like that. Is there like not anything else we can put up aside from my face? I guess it's scary this way too, but it's even more scary when it's that big. Thank you. So ADD moment. But so this Elizabeth Holmes had climbed the corporate ladder, and then in 2015, Wall Street Journal writes an article about her, and they discover all of this information and knowledge that actually she's not testing people's blood, and she's lying, and she's distorting information. Well, she didn't actually come out and say that the truth and that she was doing things the right way. She actually just tried to cover it up. So she just heaped lie on top of lie on top of lie, and finally she became this epic fail of a leader where her business went from like top $9 billion in net worth value all the way down to a zero net worth value in a period of like 18 months. And she had climbed the ladder of leadership, and when she got up here on the ladder of leadership, the foundation wasn't stable, and she fell all the way back down. And what I want to talk to you about today is something that I'm so incredibly passionate about. See, I wish that story was an isolated incident. I wish that it was something that just happened and then, no other entrepreneurs ever have epic fails. And I wish I could say that it was only in business that this happens. Like this happens in churches too. For those of you who are not around churches very much, there are a lot of pastors that do really dumb things. One of my mentors and a friend of mine had grown this large church. It was one of the fastest growing churches in the country, and made some decisions personally that caused him to have one of those epic fails. And recently, as I was reading an article of somebody who'd climbed the ladder and they had grown and they had built this great company, and I was reading about their fail, I said to my wife, it really didn't have to end that way. They could have actually climbed the ladder and stayed at the top of the ladder. They could have climbed and continued to grow in their influence if there were some things that were different about them. And the problem was that they had a foundation underneath them that wasn't secure. It's kind of like the Millennium Tower up in San Francisco, right? It's sinking now, apparently. Any of you guys have an apartment there? That's bad news. Now would probably be the best time to sell it right now before it's underneath the ground. But it happens so often that leaders grow to a place that their character cannot sustain them. And if you're taking notes, I'd like to give you a little phrase to write down here. Your skills can take you to an altitude where your character can't sustain you. Have you ever seen somebody like that? They had tremendous skill in leadership, and they could climb the ladder, but when they got on the top of the ladder, they did not have the character or the foundation, the legs underneath them, so they fell right back down. And it doesn't have to be that way. You and I can become the kind of entrepreneurs and leaders that have a secure foundation, that the legs will carry when we climb to the top. So I would like today to focus on 4 legs. There are 4 legs of character, the foundation that is what sustains you. Skill will help you climb the ladder. Character will help you sustain when you get to the top of the ladder. So what is that character that when there's more on you, when you have greater influence, will be able to carry the influence that you have? So the 4 legs that I'd like to talk through, the first one is the leg of commitment. It's the foundation of the commitment. And the question that we need to wrestle through as leaders is, are you or are we as committed as we are asking the team around us to be? Every one of us have been a part of, or most of us have been a part of a company, a team, an organization where there was a leader who wasn't as committed as they were asking other people to be. And what happened? When you saw that leader who would ask people to sacrifice in a way that they weren't willing to sacrifice themselves. Well, eventually you checked out, your teammates checked out, you looked for another job, you made a LinkedIn profile, and you tried to go to some other company as quick as you could. Or if you stayed there, what happened? You came every day, but you disengaged internally. And some of us, if we're honest with ourselves, are the kind of leaders where we want to climb the ladder corporately so that our salary can grow, so that we can be in TechCrunch, so that we can have greater levels of influence. But when it comes down to our personal commitment to the vision, we are unwilling to make the sacrifices that we're asking other people to make. So in my world, this comes down to, for pastors, your checkbook and your calendar. Like, are you as sacrificially bought into your vision as you want somebody else to be? It's your time, your talent, and your treasure. When you look at how you're investing your life, are you sitting down with a venture capitalist and asking them to invest in what you're doing, but you're not as invested as you're asking them to be? So if we can get this kind of foundation right where we're committed to the vision, people start to follow a leader that is willing to sacrifice for the vision that is in front of them. Are you as committed to the vision as you are asking other people to be? Number one. Number two is this. It's the subject of candor. And it's the question, can you trust people, or can people trust you to tell the truth, especially when the truth is hard to say? I was reading another article on entrepreneurship, a company that's very local here. It's just a couple miles. It's called Work Riot. Sorry if there are any Work Riot employees here today. But Work Riot, crazy story. It's almost laughable if you're not an employee there. So they got to this place financially where they were struggling and they couldn't meet payroll. So they met in an executive session and tried to figure out what they would do about payroll. So somebody had the brilliant idea that they would create PDFs of people's pay stubs that were fake pay stubs, and they would email them to all the employees so that the employees would think that they got their payroll, their check, and then the employee would then go and check with Wells Fargo or their bank, and then when they went to the bank and the money wasn't there, then they came back to the company, and the company said, oh, it must be the bank because we sent the money to the bank. Well, the pattern is every bank didn't get the check, so probably it started with the source, right? And it's amazing how often that level of dishonesty begins to creep into our hearts as leaders. But what people will follow and what people are looking for, and the foundation that will hold true with more influence and more leadership, is, are we the kind of people that we say what we mean and we mean what we say? Like, we've all been around a leader that is blowing sunshine on everybody and everything. And that's cool for a little while. But eventually you start to feel like that leader's not saying really what's on the inside. But if you know your leader is going to say the right thing, and if you know your leader is going to have the difficult conversation, what happens over time? Your trust for that person continues to grow more and more and more. And the question is, are we that kind of leader? Are we the kind of person that those on our team know that the truth is going to be imminent, or it's going to emanate from our lives? You know, this kind of person is the type of leader that they underpromise and they overdeliver. They tell you they're going to do something, and then their word is good to the bank, just like Luke was talking about venture capitalists, that they say they're going to give money, and they're going to give money. We want to be a part of a team with people like that, and we want to become that kind of person. So we're going to grow as leaders, and we're going to provide a secure foundation. We're going to start with commitment, then we're going to go to candor, and then the third thing that we're going to look at is the subject of consistency. And this question is, are you the same person in different environments? Now, I'm not talking about the different hats that we wear. Some of us wear the hat of being an entrepreneur. Some of us wear the hat of being an employee. Some of us have the hat of a spouse. Some of us have the hat of parents. All of us have our Warriors hat on. Any Warriors fans in the house today? And that hat that you put on in different environments, you change how you communicate in different environments based upon the hat that you're wearing. But I'm talking about the value system internally. What's inside of you? Do you treat people differently based upon what you think that they'll give to you? And if you don't feel quite like somebody has something to offer to you, do you treat them as being less? See, over time, when we're around a leader like that, we check out. We start to write them off. But on the other hand, I have a mentor, a guy by the name of Steve Stroop, and he's been investing in my life for the last 9 years. And I first knew Steve as a pastor of a church of over 10,000 people, and I only saw him on stage. And I thought, man, this is a pretty amazing leader. He seems like a really good man. And then I got to know him off stage, and I have over the last 9 years seen him in just about every environment. I've seen him in boardrooms. I've watched him with his family. I've seen him over steak dinners. I've seen him in every environment, and he's the same guy in every environment. And so consequently, my respect for him has continued to grow based upon the consistency of character in whatever environment he's in. So are you the same person when you're with a venture capitalist that you are with the janitor at your workplace who can do nothing for you except clean up after you? See, this is the kind of person that when they get more influence, it doesn't go to their ego, but actually it leads them to the place where the fourth leg becomes true, and that's the leg of care. And the question here is, do you love and care for people? Another way of thinking about it is, are you trying to build products in order to develop people, or are you trying to build people in order to develop products? See, a lot of entrepreneurs and companies and churches alike are so focused on the product that we forget about the people. And if we can meet our quota, if we can make our numbers higher, if we can have more cash flow, if we can have more revenue, and then consequently we're willing to leave people in the dust, or maybe even we see somebody on the ladder and they're in our way and they're not climbing fast enough. Anybody know somebody like that? And we're just willing to throw them down because they're in our way as we're climbing up the ladder. But if we would start to see the way that we love and care for people as being essential for leadership, it builds a foundation that echoes from our organization. And we become the kind of leaders that are known. That person, that leader, he, she loves people. Now, I'm not talking about like you need to have a counseling session every single day with every employee, okay? Oh my gosh, if that was entrepreneurship, I would boom, go crazy. Now, if you're a counselor, I'm grateful for you, but that's why we have counselors, right? We pay the counselor to do that job. But I'm talking about, do you see your platform as a leader primarily to help others around you succeed and win? Do you see that when you climb the ladder of leadership, that you and I have the opportunity to lend a hand to the people who are coming behind us? Sometimes it's correction. Sometimes it's an encouragement. Sometimes it's an attaboy. Sometimes it's a thank you note. Sometimes it's a gift for them and their spouse to go out on a date. But when you get a leader like that, what happens to you? You are willing to do whatever it takes for the vision that that leader has placed in front of your organization. So if it impacts us personally that way, how much more should we want to become the kind of leader that we're the kind of person that those around us know that we really do value people. The greatest asset of your organization is not your product, it's the people. So sometimes I think that, I heard this in the venture capitalists, that we think because we have a great product or a great idea that that's how we're going to change the world. Ideas don't change the world, people change the world. And when you get the right people that can think and work together around the right idea, that's when the change happens. But it doesn't happen primarily from the idea, it happens from the person. So we want to become the kind of leaders that are passionate about loving and serving and developing the people around us. Unless you think that like this is just like, I don't know, a bunch of church talk. Guys, this is so evident in entrepreneurship and leadership all over the world. That there are so many leaders who have tremendous skills and gifts and talents. They can communicate in front of large groups of people, and they can build teams, and they can make great products, and they're technicians, and all of that is awesome, and it's necessary for leadership. But there are a lot of people that are really great with the skills, but they're miserable inside. And they've climbed that corporate ladder, and they're all alone up here, and they're broken, and they're empty, and their life has no meaning, and their life has no significance, and their life has no purpose. But then there are people who climb the ladder, and they do it with a secure foundation underneath. And what happens is when they get to the top, their lives echo. They continue to make an impact on the world around them. I was sitting in a leadership conference this summer, and I was listening to Melinda Gates speak. And I was blown away by this woman's story. As a young college student, she was trying to process what she was going to do. Would she go to the Northeast to New York or out to the West Coast? And she made the right decision and moved to the West Coast. And she gets to this emerging company that at that point wasn't very much. It was a company called Microsoft. And she starts off, and she's serving, and she very quickly climbs the corporate ladder. She secures her destiny in the organization by marrying the CEO, which is a great strategy, right? But I think that the downside of the strategy, ADD moment here, I was thinking the downside, though, is if you lose your marriage, you lose your job. And if you lose your job, you lose your marriage. But the upside is, like, you're hitched for a while. But she got it. And she's connected to Bill Gates, who at the time is not the richest man in the world, but he's climbing, he's getting there. And she got to the ladder at the top, and she looked around and she realized, we're like the richest people on planet Earth. And we weren't given all this just so that we could take it and go on cruises all the time and enjoy it for ourselves. She said at the conference, she said, what billionaire couldn't give away half of their net worth and be fine for the rest of their life? I'm like, I know somebody who'll take it. But she gets to the top, and she realizes that she's been blessed. She has so that she can give to others, so that her life can echo, so that she can make a difference. So she starts seeing all these needs around the world. She starts giving and recruiting billionaires to give. Guys, in like a decade, Melinda Gates and Bill Gates worked in Africa to fight against malaria, and 40% decline in one decade from the influence of one woman. Now, we're not talking like 100 lives. We're talking like 600,000 people that die every year because of malaria, but she cut that number in 40% because of her influence and leadership. Do you want to be that kind of leader? Do you want to become the kind of entrepreneur that your life echoes? You can grow in skills. That's awesome. But if you get the foundation right when you start, if you become the kind of person that is committed to your vision and people see it, if you're honest and you live with candor, if you're the kind of person that's consistent in whatever environment that you're in, and ultimately, if you're the kind of person that cares for the people around you, you're going to leverage your influence and have a greater probability of staying on the ladder, and ultimately, your life will echo. Thank you guys so much for being here.
All right. That was great. Okay, we want to move into another section where we're going to have, Tony, if you're here, come on up, and we're going to go into what we call our startup wars. And what it is really taking a chance of looking under the hood, looking in the closet, beginning to dig deep into the nitty-gritty, the dirty of what it means to be an entrepreneur. So we wanted to bring some entrepreneurs up and have a time of just working through some of the issues that they face and some of the issues that you can connect to. So will you guys welcome these entrepreneurs? And Tony, will you introduce them for us?
Oh, he's there. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Hope you guys are all enjoying the conference so far. My name is Tony Yang. I'm a VP of Marketing at a Sequoia Capital-backed startup called Mintigo. And I'm the moderator for this next panel discussion that we're calling Startup Wars. So now, for those of you who are part of the startup community, I'm sure you know that for every successful startup business, there are probably hundreds that fail or are currently struggling. I'm sure our VC friends will verify that. And even for the successful companies, they got to that point from learning from their own mistakes and failures along the way, right? And so joining me on the panel today are some entrepreneurs and consultants who went through the ringer and are still alive. So you guys are here. Well, welcome, guys. Why don't we start off by having each of you give a brief intro to yourself and talk a little bit about the businesses that you start. Victor, why don't you start with you?
Hi, my name is Victor. I'm the CEO of a company called 5 Stars, and our mission is to help small businesses turn all their transactions into relationships. And so specifically, we provide rewards programs for these businesses that include CRM and marketing automation solution on the back end to help bring their customers back more often.
Hi everyone, Michael Brito here. I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm more of an intrapreneur. So I work and manage an agency out of San Francisco, and we work with a lot of companies doing digital marketing, social media, some PR, and grew up here in the Valley, worked for Yahoo, worked for HP and Intel throughout my career, and I'm really glad to be here. Thank you, Mandy, for the invitation.
Hello guys, I'm Simon. I used to be an entrepreneur in the past 10 years. Recently changed my role due to the acquisition of the company called Prediction.io by Salesforce. So Prediction.io is a machine learning server for developers to build smarter applications. And I'm running the AI initiative in Salesforce now.
My name's Ted. I am the owner of Stein's Beer Garden in downtown Mountain View. And it's a craft beer focused restaurant. I like to call it a modern American take on the classic German beer garden.
Awesome. Well, and for you guys who don't know, tonight's libations were provided courtesy of Stein's Beer Garden. So thank you, Ted.
Yeah.
There's, we referenced the show Silicon Valley, and there's these scenes where the show parodies or makes fun of startup and entrepreneurs that said they're going to change the world. Well, Ted, you're changing the world through beer. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's just jump right in. Earlier in the evening, we heard Liz Wiseman talk about leadership, and that's been the one of the themes throughout the various discussion and panels. I'd like to ask some of you guys, in your experience as co-founders, owners of businesses, and CEOs, how has your leadership style changed through the years from, leading a small 5-person startup to Victor, maybe for your company, several hundred people, and then with Simon, you're part of a larger enterprise with Salesforce. How has your leadership styles changed throughout the years?
So I think in a lot of ways, when I look back at myself 5 years ago, it's almost a joke. I think it's miraculous that I'm still alive and we're still here. But I guess I'll just pick one aspect of change. And I think a big part of growth as an entrepreneur comes from your company's growth. As the company grows and the different org structures change and your products and your goals change, it forces you to change. And one of the biggest moments, as I think back, was the moment we passed around 40 to 60 employees. And before that, there's a great article by Vinod Khosla where he says that most startups are in a hub and spoke model. What that means is you have founders as the hub, you kind of meet with every employee at least on a weekly basis. You know everyone personally. And as such, you're able to lead almost kind of without too much thinking. They just kind of emulate what they see about you, the character they see you reflect, the whatever mission, the things you care about, they will just naturally assimilate that. However, very abruptly, what happened is once you pass that 60 or so person mark and you're adding layers to your organization, there's like the next layer down that happens, you're bringing in directors and VPs, then suddenly I found myself very abruptly in a situation where I was not in contact with people weekly anymore, and there were many people that I knew their names, but I no longer knew them deeply. And what I found as our company was growing rapidly was that the mission and values I cared so much about were quickly disappearing. And in a way, there was this period I remember very clearly where I felt like we doubled the number of our employees, but almost halved our productivity. It was almost this feeling of a bunch of electrons bouncing around and colliding with each other. And I realized it was because people were no longer aligned. And so that was one very big transition where I had to learn to be explicit about what our mission was, our values were, be explicit about what was rewarded and what wasn't. And that was a completely new way of thinking for me.
So did you purposely, at the very onset of your company, establish those vision and values to really establish that culture within your company at the very beginning?
No, I didn't. I think that's one of the biggest things I would change if I could go back. But it was through pain and necessity that I came up with them later on, and then it took months of pounding it into people's head in course correction.
Now, Simon, how about you? What's your experience?
Yeah, I agree with Victor. And in fact, the objective of leadership doesn't change much from like a 5 people company, 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people companies. But it's really the methods to communicate the goal, to align people together, to drive people to move to the same direction, following the visions. The methods to communicate change a lot from this, based on the size of the company. So in a small startup, early stage company, communication is easy. Communication is fast, it's cheap. We can make big direction change just through a few message on the Slack channel or a few chat on the corridor. Not the same when the company grow or when you in a bigger organizations where communication is way more complicated and there are layers. So I may not be the only one who are talking about the visions, and I might not even be the one who is speaking to every single person. So the formats of the communications need to change a lot, be more formal, and the media will need to become more persistent, something reusable, deliverable by other people. And so it sounds like the early startup has a lot of advantage over larger organizations. But one thing to keep in mind when you're in early stage, though, is yes, the message passed through very quickly, but it's a two-sided sword. If you're thinking out loud in the channel, everyone in your team will be thinking, oh, you're changing your directions every minute. So be careful about thinking out loud versus making decisions.
Great, thank you.
So,
Michael, you have
I
something?
adopted an organization of 75 people, and all of which are millennials. So that in itself has challenges. But I also adopted the cultures and norms that some of which I didn't really agree with. So looking back over the last 6 months of just literally the last 6 months has been filled with a lot of change. And this is not tweetable, by the way, for those of you who are live streaming. I had to cut out the decay. And I think somebody mentioned decay earlier, where I think it was Liz actually, where there's this culture of decay, of gossip, of manipulation. And I had to cut it out in order to break it down and build something new. And so for me, to your point, it's not really, it's more about, for me, leading with empathy and understanding how millennials, and I'm not trying to box millennials and put them in a corner, but generalizing, it's understanding what they expect, what their needs are, and putting myself in their position so that I can motivate them, I can inspire them to work harder. And so that is my cultural vision, which is put employees first. Even though we're a service-oriented agency, I mean, our clients pay us to provide digital marketing and social media and all these other things. So I purposely put employees first with understanding that there is a business benefit to that, which is if you put employees first, you inspire them, you give them, you let them lead with creativity, they will in turn be very excited to come to work. They will be happy, retention rates will decrease, they will produce a higher quality work, and that equals happy clients. And happy clients spend more money. So there is a business benefit to leading with this idea that employees, and I think even Andy said it as well, it's the people. You produce and you build a culture of inspiration, they're going to produce good products, they're going to produce good work.
Yeah, that's a great point. So to write off of that, as leaders in your organization, bring on the right people to your teams is so important, especially in the early stages, right? What do you guys look for? I mean, even from the very beginning, when you're looking for a potential partner to work with, to the first few key hires, what are some of the characteristics that you guys look for to bring to your team? Because, as Michael mentioned, if you bring on people that don't fit the culture or what you're trying to achieve, it could cause more damage than good. So what are some of your experiences with that?
I'll just quickly say that when I hire, I don't necessarily look for skills. Like, skills can be taught. I look for character, and I try to do my best to understand, and I'll do my own little background check, and like Google them, and if I know anybody that they know, I'll do like a backdoor reference, and I'll try to understand, do they lead with integrity? Are they a hard worker? Do they inspire others? Are they collaborative? And they may not have the skills that I need. They may not know how to, drive media on Facebook, or they may not understand how to drive promotions in other channels. That's okay. You can learn all that. But integrity is something for me that I look for in any candidate, and even also partners as well.
Commitment, consistency, candor, and care. But
Wow.
But in all seriousness, well, I am serious about that. I think those are actually great things to look for, and probably what I look for are actually those things in a slightly different articulation. But the character of the person, I've come to believe, is far and away the most important. As an entrepreneur, especially if you're a first-time entrepreneur, you're inexperienced, you're young, you're trying to figure things out, there's a strong temptation to hire the big shot that comes through your door with a really shiny resume. But what I've learned over and over again is that as a startup, no matter how good things look, it's going to be a roller coaster, and there are going to be some very dark days. And at the end of the day, the person who is the most aligned with your mission and who has a character that most aligns with yours is the one that actually will stick it out with you when things are bleak. And actually, that big shot person who has all the right skills but doesn't actually care, they're going to cause you by far the most devastation when things are low and they jump ship without thinking, because everyone else is going to look at them. And so I think, many people learn it the hard way, myself included, but that alignment can never be compromised.
So as a beer guy, I think I'm the only one with a brick and mortar small business out of everyone here. I think it's a little bit different. I didn't go from 5 to 100 something. I went from 0 to 110. And I think for me, it's knowing what you know and knowing what you don't know. So, opening a restaurant wasn't my ambition. It was, I'm a beer guy. What can I do with beer to surround myself with it and make a living? And that's how it started, right? Like I used to work for Disney. I used to work for Samsung. And my favorite part of the day was happy hour at Yard House. I think all great ideas start like that, right? You're going after the thing that drives you, the thing that you're passionate about, and that turned into this full-on, I want to open the best craft beer bar in the Bay Area. But that evolved into Stein's, which is a 12,000 square foot restaurant, and that's, if you guys don't know, that's a massive restaurant. Like I can seat 433 people. But I didn't know the first thing about running a restaurant, so I knew the beer, I knew what was good. But I needed to surround myself with people that knew what they were doing also. So found an amazing executive chef. We have an all-scratch kitchen. He runs that kitchen, and chefs are crazy. Like, all chefs are crazy, and you have to learn to adapt. So, like, I'm learning to deal with this guy, and he's like Hell's Kitchen, throwing stuff, and so learning that aspect of it, and then finding a great GM that was able to manage the front of the house, and going off as his experience. But his experience was working in bars and in Vegas, and both these guys are old school, and I think as the owner, someone that is trying to put this all together and stick with my vision of the kind of restaurant, the kind of business that I wanted to run, it's hard when you have these really strong egos and they want to do things their way because they're experienced, they know it. And I think the thing that I learned the most was, don't compromise on your core principles, right? So for me, it was, I don't want to compromise on the service, on the quality of the food. We're not going to have anything frozen in the back. The beer's going to be kick-ass. It's going to be like, we're going to go out of our way to get good beer. We will pay a premium for it because I want to have the best beer list. All my bar staff has to be Cicerone certified. Lines clean every 2 weeks. And then it's really adapting to those personalities and getting them on board. And I don't want to take up too much time, but I think it's ownership. How do you instill ownership in your management team so that they feel, even though they're technically an employee, that this is their place too, that they're willing to get there at 6 a.m. and leave at 2 a.m. Because they feel like this is their place. They're going to put their blood, sweat, and tears. And I think a lot of that is, like Andy said, it's from the top. They look at me, and so I have to be that example. The first thing I do when I open a new restaurant is I'll do the dishes. I'll go and I'll clean the bathrooms. Anytime I see something on the floor, I'll pick it up because this is me training my staff to say, I need you guys to have ownership. This is the stuff that you guys need to be doing also. And they do. I've got a great team right now.
That's great. So one thing that I picked up on through some of your comments was that you learned a lot as you progressed. Now, learning from either past mistakes or failures is really integral to growth, right? Especially for startup companies. What were some of the most important lessons that you guys learned as you grew your company from scratch to where it is today?
Don't be an entrepreneur. No, I'm just kidding. So I think one thing I learned in the past years is your relationship with people usually lasts longer than your relationship with the company you built. It's kind of like unbelievable at the beginning, because for entrepreneur, the startup, the company you're building is everything, almost everything. But now if I look back, company fails, company got acquired, some companies goes IPO and you got diluted, some CEO got fired, some CEO got replaced, or you might change your passions. So your relationship with the company you built lasts for a certain time. But then when I look back, the investor who invested in my first company 10 years ago is still my investor of my last company a few years ago. The high school friends, he become my CTO of the last company. And clients, customers in the first two companies, they become customers of the latest company as well. So relationship really lasts long, and it's how you treat people. People remember it no matter how, like which company you're working at, whether you're still an entrepreneur or where you're working with other companies. And one more tip is I learned that the best way to build relationship is when you're not asking for something. Like when you make business contact, make connections, tea, whatever, if you're asking for something, it's hard to have a genuine relationship building thing. So it's when you don't need to ask for anything.
I have two quick comments. One is this idea, which is called reciprocal altruism. It's actually a biology term, but what it means in context of leadership is giving without any expectation of receiving anything in return. So from a leadership standpoint, even from a marketing perspective, if you're a small business or you're building products, if you give to the community, you give to your employees without expectations, you're going to reap the benefits. The second is this concept of listening without action is worse than not listening at all. And so I learned, I've been married 17 years, if I can just say a quick story, 17 years. I got married when I was 10, if you're interested. And one of the things I learned early on in my marriage is that this concept of listening. And I'd be in situations with my wife where it'd be Sunday or it'd be, Monday Night Football, and she'd be communicating with me, and I'd be looking at her and I'd be saying yes, but I'd be listening to the game, right? And I wouldn't really hear her. Or she would ask me, honey, in the morning, I might leave my socks on the not that any of you do this, but I leave my socks, in the living room, and in the morning she'll pick them up and say, honey, can you do me a favor? Can you please put your socks in the hamper when you go to bed at night? And that consistent listening without action can cause contentment. And so I apply that kind of learning from as a married person, as a leader, and apply that to everyday life. So when I'm talking to the intern who is expressing a concern or is unhappy with his or her boss, I'm actually listening, but I'm also doing some level of action. And that action could be corrective action. It could be just giving them tissue to cry, because I get that a lot. It could be, communicating with his or her team members or even clients. So those are two areas that I think for me, I've learned a lot, and I've tried to perfect, and I continue to mold and flex and adapt those models.
Yeah, this is gonna sound so cliche, but for those of you that are looking to start your own business, you have to persevere through the failures. And 2007, January 1st, 2007, that's when I first decided I want to do this whole give up corporate life and pursue this crazy beer thing. That first day, that entire year, I call it the year of rejection. I had so many doors slammed in my face, and this is a kid that knew nothing. I didn't know anything about the restaurant industry. I knew I loved beer. I didn't have any money, and I just knocked on every single door, every lead I had. I called random people. It was the most terrifying year of my life, and I failed miserably. But I took away two really important lessons that at the end of the year. The first was I needed to get experience. The common theme that all these potential investors and everyone was telling me was, we love your idea, you have a ton of passion, we believe that you believe that this is gonna work, but we just wish you had a little bit more experience. So, long story short, the next 5 years of my life, I dedicated towards getting that experience. And if any of you know Paris Baguette, I was the first GM of Paris Baguette in Santa Clara. There's like 10 locations now, but that was it. That's where I got my experience. And the second thing that I learned was, this means a lot to me. Like, by the end of the year, like, I knew this is what I wanted to do because I'd gone through all that, and I said, no, this is it. Like, I don't care. Like, I'm gonna pursue this because I'd been beaten up so bad, and at the end of it, I still looked at myself and I said, I still want this. And it's that determination, that resolve that got me through those next 5 years, and those next 5 years are what piqued the interest of my now current partners. And they were saying, the thing that they said to me was, Ted, we've known you before Paris Baguette, we know you after, we know this whole beer garden idea that you had before, and if you're willing to put up and put on hold your life for 3-5 years to pursue this, like, that says more about your character than it does about, you can serve beer anywhere, right? And everyone has a good beer list. But it says more about you and how you drive your business and what that says about the kind of business that you're going to create. So failure is such a big part of it, and I think you have to go through that, really, and not give up to see what you're made of and see what you really want to do.
It's great. So shifting gears a little bit, a big part of this EKO Conference is learning how to lead for more than just your company and your product and for profits, right? What Andy talked about. And even in the VC panel, this was addressed a little bit. Now, let's get real here. You guys are entrepreneurs, start your own business. And I worked for startups before, and I know that when the rubber meets the road, you're making sure in everything in your power that your company is able to keep going forward, right? And so a lot of times, this whole CSR, corporate social responsibility, or doing social good, or giving back to the community, whether it's in your own company or within outside your organization, it doesn't really come to your mind at the forefront of your mind. You're trying to make payroll. You're trying to win the next customer. You're trying to keep your last customer from churning, right? So how do you guys, as founders and people who've been through the weeds before, how do you keep that the line in terms of how do I make sure that I'm working with integrity, but also keeping the employees or the people around me, the bigger vision that you have in the forefront?
So I think it's a tough thing to do, and it's absolutely a daily struggle. No matter how hard you try, I'm sure it's fraught with more failure than it is success. But to me, I think one of the most important things as an entrepreneur, when you're dedicating your life to something, is to just clearly articulate what success actually means. When I'm at the end of this, is it that I want to have a public company? Is it that I want to have a lot of money? What is it that you actually want? And being very clear about that mission statement for the company, but even for yourself, I think is by far the most important. And so for me, for instance, I can give a reflection. My past path, started at Goldman Sachs as an investment banker. In 2007, we caused this massive mortgage crisis and a lot of people lose a lot of things. And then I went to McKinsey, and my dream at that time was to go into private equity. And I thought, okay, great, there's these specific firms. I've killed myself for 100 hours a week to get here, and finally I had these right in front of me. And I thought, I'm going to get this great line on my resume. I'm going to make a bunch of money. I'm going to make my Asian parents super proud, and I can just check everything off the box. And for me, I had a clear moment at the airport in San Francisco. I'd flown out for final rounds with the dream job I wanted, and my flight got delayed for an hour. And when I was there at that airport, I could just hear very clearly in my heart God telling me, Victor, you're being this massive coward. You know exactly what you're supposed to do. You know that you're supposed to go be an entrepreneur, and there's a specific impact I want you to make, but you're trying to chase your resume. And that was my personal story. I think everyone's reflects differently, but I knew that actually business was supposed to be my mission field, and I had a specific mission statement around it. And so I think it's this daily struggle of I go to TechCrunch, and the world tells me success means bringing a company public. They tell me success means raising a bunch of money or whatever it is. But I think that's what's so hard is there's this massive heart temptation constantly to do what the world tells you success is because you want that approval. And so for me, I found that actually by far the most important thing is waking up and in the morning remembering how I define success, what that actually means, and what I want to be able to say I did at the end of everything. And even then, it's a struggle, but it's the best thing that I've done so far.
And I learned from my first startup is we start donating money to charity from our revenue, even we're not profit making, which is kind of not the best decision to make. But what I learned is money is like oxygen. It's something you need to empower everything, empower a lot of good wills you want to do. But at the same time, you're not living for it. So you can't live without oxygen. You can't run the business. You can't sustain everyone in the company without money. But at the same time, it's not what you live for, not what you create a company for. It's for the better things you want to do. It's for the impacts you want to create, bring to the world.
I think in a very practical way, it's accountability. Like just find one or two people that are going to keep you grounded. And I remember when I was interviewing my GM, he had the nerve to tell me like, if you hire me, I never want to see you complacent. And he said, I always want, you got to be better than me, right? And that's not just as far as leadership, but ideas and the growth and the vision and everything. And I'm like, okay. I hired the guy, but he pushes me more than I can ever push myself. And I think it's important, right? Because you can get lost in this. And Liz is like spot on the money. Like I'm super underqualified to be doing I'm underqualified to be on this panel, right? Like, but you have that accountability and you keep people around you that care about you, that want your best interests at heart, that will never let you, get off into la la land. I think that's really important to have.
And I'll just finish by saying, for me, it's being grounded and centered internally and having a support system around me to make the bad guys go away. Because my life is chaotic. At work, it's literally a life or death situation. It's moving with a sense of urgency in everything that I do. Starting at 5 a.m., ending about 7 or 8 p.m. at night. Everything from signing expense reports to doing a PowerPoint presentation to conference calls. Everything I do is done with a sense of urgency, and I get home tired. But the great news is I can get home and I can relax, and I'm surrounded by people who love me. And I can wake up the next morning and start all over again.
That's great. So in a second, we're going to hear from Nancy Duarte, who is an expert in presentations and storytelling. Now, in startups and building your own company, and this is also speaking from experience, one of the most difficult things early on is figuring out your story that you want to tell to the world, or at least to your target audience, right? And it could be as difficult as, Ted, you're in the beer and restaurant business. How do you differentiate yourself from the hundreds of other restaurants in the area? To Simon, telling or explaining to people what predictive analytics is, right?
It's hard.
Right. So how did you guys end up developing your story? And Michael, I know you have a lot to say about this since you're a brand guy, you're a marketer as well. What are some tips that you could give to aspiring entrepreneurs who have an idea, but how do you bring that idea to a point where it really resonates with the market that they're trying to attract?
I'll be quick because it's saying wrap it up, please. It's important to just have a legacy. Like, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be remembered for? For me, it's not a great manager. At the end of the day, it's, I want to be remembered as a great husband and a great father and a great friend. All that other stuff doesn't matter to me. I'm having fun. That's all that matters. And for me, it's legacy, and that's how I try to build my personal brand.
So for me, we were building a very complicated product, and the best way to explain to pitch to customer, you need our product, is not to say you need your product. It's more like, if we have pilot customers similar to them, then they can resonate with it. And pilot customers meaning like the first few companies that are actually using our product to solve a problem or getting values. And you might be thinking, so it's a chicken and egg questions, right? You don't have customers. How do you get pilot customers? This is where friends are for. But be careful about pilot customers, though. It's like a spiral. The spiral can go down. It can also go up. So if you're getting, for example, if you're targeting the financial industry and you're getting your friends in the e-commerce industry to become this pilot customer, you end up get more and more e-commerce customers and never get to your goal. So be very careful about selecting the first few pilot customers, and it will bring you a long way to get what you want.
Yeah, so I'll be quick. So to be honest, I wasn't really focused on like everyone outside of me. Like I was really focused on what I wanted to do, and what I wanted to do was have integrity, create a good product, and have a standard of service that was good for me. And I think if I just by focusing on those things, you end up with a product, be it a restaurant or an app or a service that will attract success and become successful just by virtue of you not losing focus and being passionate about the thing that you're first passionate about. If I worried about every other beer place and every other restaurant, and that was where my focus was, then my own house would get in disorder. In fact, I had a reporter come to me when Stein's first opened, and her question was, how is the relationship with Tide House, which is a microbrewery just down the street? And I was like, it's great. Like, what do you mean? And she thought, you guys are direct competitors, and I never saw it like that. So just to prove her wrong, we walked over to Tide House, we introduced ourselves, and collectively, we threw the first annual Mountain View Oktoberfest 3 years ago, which, by the way, is in 3 weeks in downtown Mountain View. We're expecting 12,000 people this year, and it is one of the best things. And talk about synergy and bringing different kinds of people together for a common goal, and all in the name of having good fun. I think that's great.
It's great. All right, one last question, and we'll wrap it up. So if you guys could travel back in time and meet your younger selves, what's one word of advice you would give to yourself?
So I know what I would say. I don't think I would be able to do it, and I still can't do it today. But what I would say is to separate your company and your performance from your identity. And what I mean by that is I've seen a lot of entrepreneurs that are peers, but your company will go up and down, and there will be a lot of really low lows. And if you actually associate your identity with how well your company is doing, which is this massive temptation since it's your whole life, what will happen is you will feel like crap when it's going down. I've been through periods definitely where like the anxiety is so palpable, it's like physically manifests, and then you will make terrible decisions, not just strategically, but for your people and many other things. So if I think about the times when I made the worst decisions, it's when I've coupled my identity with our performance and something's going on. And the best of times has been when I've been able to decouple it, and even in the midst of a storm can be clear-eyed about how to approach things.
I always worried about what other people thought about me. Like even early on in college and in the military, I always wanted to be the best at this or the best at that or be recognized for this. And it caused me to lose focus. So looking back at myself, I really wish I would have just focused on myself, my goals, my vision. And I think I would have been I would have progressed a lot faster. Although I am happy where I am at now if I look back at my career. But there was a period of time in my life where, I looked at everybody else, but myself.
Echo to what I said before, people relationship is more important than the current startup in front of your eye.
I think it's don't pretend. I think I stressed out more by pretending to know about contracts, and pretending to be this good leader. And what I learned is it's okay to say, I don't know, but let me find the person that does know, and I'll help moderate it. But it's okay, and I think that vulnerability is a strength, especially when the staff sees you being open. You don't have all the answers, but you're willing to find them out. Like you'll garner way more respect that way, I feel like.
Great. Well, thank you guys for joining me on this panel. Let's give our panelists a hand.
I've been to Scott.
Guys.
Oh, have you?
All right. Hey, we're going to take just 25 seconds. Stand up and stretch real quick. before we have our next presenter. No bathroom break, just stretch. High five somebody. Make sure they're looking so you don't smack them in the face. All righty. I was just checking. That was a great session. I was just checking with Ted there, and we're going to start a whiskey garden called Old Man's Whiskey Garden. Thank you, Andy. This next presenter, when you think of like rock stars like Bono, this is the Bono of design. This is, if you think of late night television, this is the Jimmy Fallon of late night television. This is of storytelling. This is a person that is going to really kind of shape conversation about story, brand, marketing. This is Nancy Duarte. Nancy has started a firm called Duarte Designs and have shaped the perceptions of the world's leading brands and thought leaders: Adobe, Chick-fil-A, Cisco, Citrix, all kinds of companies that you would see and be familiar with. We have the privilege of having her tonight. And will you please welcome with me Nancy Duarte?
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Let's make sure these slides work. So today I'm going to talk to you about leading through story. I'm really excited to do that. The difference between a manager and a leader is that a manager manages the present and a leader creates the future. So as entrepreneurs here, you get to cultivate a prophetic imagination and imagine something that's never been made or built before. And then if you cultivate your leadership skills, you'll be able to drive your audiences to get there with you. So what does a venture into the future look like? Well, there's a common symbol in business today that makes it look a lot like an S curve, the S curve of innovation. So business is a lot like life. You're born, you live, you die, unless you reinvent yourself. And businesses go into these states of decay, which has been mentioned here a couple times, and then it needs the infusion of a new reinvention to make it last in the future. So what you need to do is become a really good communicator because you're basically in a chronic state of change, constantly changing. And becoming a really good storyteller is a key part because storytelling moves people. In fact, when you tell a story, all the parts of your brain light up, so your audience is actually processing the information more fully. Another thing that happens is when the storyteller is doing the telling and the listener is doing the listening, the brains are actually firing in the exact same sequence. So you can actually kind of control the order in which people are processing the information by wrapping it into the shape of a story. The other thing that happens is stories transport you. You could be listening to a story and be heavily analytical type. You'll actually suspend your belief on this earth long enough to believe something outside of your comfort zone before you even know it. So it'll transport you. The other thing that happens is motivate you. Your body actually releases chemicals in the system that actually will motivate you to buy if you've been told a story. So it's pretty powerful. So I'm going to talk about 3 things that needs to be in your communication toolkit that are based in story. And the first is storytelling itself, the actual telling of a story. So storytelling is as old as time. Aristotle in Poetics said it had a 3-act structure, which is still true. And so many of our presentations today don't even have a 3-act structure. But the first act is where you establish the protagonist as likable. Everyone wants to root for them. They're going to root for you. And then there's this messy middle. This is where the protagonist has everything imaginable thrown at them, all kinds of hardships. And those hardships make them emerge transformed. Presenting and storytelling is a lot about change, articulating the change and driving people through it. But when you look at a story arc, this is Freytag's dramatic structure. This is where we get the concept of story as having an arc to it. You can see that messy middle. It builds as a climax. There's this building of tension and releasing it. You get a cathartic emotional release when someone's heard a story and you build and then it releases. And that's a very powerful communication tool. So this feels about the right time for me to tell a story, to bring this little section to a close. So I too was this little likable hero. I was born into an economically and emotionally starved environment. My mom was a bipolar narcissist with a touch of alcoholism thrown in. And so pretty much all the abuse and neglect that happens in a family like that. And she left the family when I was only 16 years old. For some reason, I felt compelled to take over as the leader of the family, did all the dishes, the shopping, cared for my siblings. And then by the time I was headed off to college, I was just burnt. First year of college, speech communication class. Woohoo! C minus. D in English, now I write English, books in English about speech communications. I was so discouraged, I dropped out. I married my junior high sweetheart, 34 years of marriage. Yeah, I should do a talk on that. The thing that was interesting is I said one word in there that actually shaped my life, and that was that my mother was a narcissist. What a narcissist is they're actually missing the empathy gene. So what happened in my world, when a young girl doesn't have empathy modeled for her, she doesn't know how to be empathetic. My life quest and my entire body of work has been a quest for empathy, to try to process things from someone else's perspective because it was never modeled for me. So the tools I'm going to share for you today are fruits of that journey that I've had myself. So that was it. Likable hero, went through all these roadblocks, and now I'm changed. Did you see the 3-act structure? So that's what I just did. I used a story. It's awesome. So the other thing based in storytelling is the telling of speeches. So when I went through this long journey through storytelling, I made a discovery. When you're sitting through a really great speech, have you noticed it has a rhythm and a cadence and a pulsing to it? And you're like, what is that? You know what that is? That means the speaker built tension and released it. They borrowed from storytelling, the building of tension and releasing it. So I made a discovery that the greatest communicators follow a shape. Click. And this is the shape. This is over time. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Great communicators first establish what is. This is establishing your credibility and a shared common truth. Oh, this is the elephant in the room. This is how poorly we performed, whatever that truth is. When you introduce what could be your hope of a future, that gap is the inciting incident in a story. What's happening is suddenly your audience's world is out of balance, and then you use the rest of the structure to bring balance back to the world. So as you contrast what is, what could be, what happens is suddenly what is just isn't appealing because for the first time I can see what could be. And the end of your talk needs to state the new bliss. This is a picture of the world with your idea adopted. What does that look like and how do you communicate it? So I'm going to give you some examples of some great communicators. Here's what could be my clicker. I had a feeling it would struggle to reach. Bam, there. That's pretty good. So I used it as an analysis tool, started to transcribe everything I could find. So I looked at politicians. Margaret Thatcher did a very famous Iron Lady speech. And you can see from the slides, skip past it. She starts off with what is, moves back and forth between what is and what could be, ending high and to the right with the new bliss. It works internationally. Nehru gave a very famous speech. It's the I Have a Dream speech of India. It was given the eve that India was freed from British rule. It's called A Tryst with Destiny, and it's the most beloved speech in India. And this is the shape of the speech. Almost perfect cadence. You can see the frequency is almost perfect. It also works for, man, this clicker is really sucking. Spiritual leaders, Jesus, Sermon on the Mount, fastest, most rapid speech I could find. So this talk, if you read it at the speed of an audiobook at 150 words a minute, it's 18 minutes long. So Jesus may have given the first TED Talk. I'm just saying. Yeah. So Richard Feynman, great educator. He was also known as the Great Explainer because people who were not even taking physics classes at Caltech would run across the campus and audit his classes because he was so freaking interesting and he was a scientist. So you can see his, this is a gravity talk and it's super tight frequency. So you guys that are in technical fields, don't dismiss the power of story because it goes back pretty rapidly back and forth between what is and what could be in the gravity lecture. So that's kind of cool. And then we also have business leader Steve Jobs did a 90-minute talk. Do not do a 90-minute talk unless you're awesome. So his 90-minute talk, you can see it has a heightened sense of what could be. But another thing that happened is Mr. Jobs had them laughing and clapping in almost 20-second increments. They are physically reacting to the stories he's telling, which is the power of story. Amazing. And then obviously nonprofits, cause-related. Dr. King, he gave a 16-minute talk in DC, and this is the shape of his talk. Starts off with what is, moves back and forth. Now you can see about 2/3 of the way through, it gets really tight frequency, and that's when he moved to using the gap between what is and what could be at the phrase level. I have a dream that one day, I have a dream that one day. Very beautiful. Dr. King didn't name this the I Have a Dream speech. He actually titled this speech, The Fierce Urgency of Now. The people named it the I Have a Dream speech because of this beautiful sequence. So some of the most cited parts of the most beloved speeches use the gap between what is and what could be at the phrase level. Those are really, really amazing examples of great speeches. So I'm introducing new language into the business vernacular. It's called ceremony. It also has a 3-act story structure. And I want to go over that. It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. The kinds of ceremonies I'm talking about are like a bar mitzvah. A young boy shows up, goes through a ceremony. He's a man, you know. Someone shows up to get married. They get married. They have in-laws. All that happened was like a 10-minute thing, you know, and that's it. And suddenly they're changed. Suddenly they're completely different. In the book, my co-author and I, we had the privilege of marrying Hispanic men, and so we picked the quinceañera as the example. A little girl comes, she's got her little flat heels, she wears a little drab dress, and she carries a dolly. She goes through this little ceremony, a transition, and she gets to put on high heels, a tiara, a scepter, and she gets jewelry, and she passes her dolly to another girl in the room. She's a woman. So she goes back now into her environment. She reincorporates into society, not as a little girl, as a woman, okay? This is really important collectively. As you start to drive your corporation, ceremonies are about endings and beginnings, endings and beginnings. Something needs to end so something new can begin. And we have to do demarcations between what is dead, what's done decaying and is dead, and what's to begin again. So I'm going to give you a quick case study about Apple. Mr. Jobs came back to Apple after 10 years. It was in decay, and he needed to move the company from Mac OS 9 to Mac OS 10. This was the largest software migration in history, but he communicated like crazy to make it happen. He had to make it happen, and Apple wasn't doing that great. This was the cover of the magazine. Some of you guys are too young to even know Apple was once not that great. So he did a few ceremonies that are intriguing to me. First thing he did, obviously, he hit the road, starts doing presentations. He had a presentation called Apple's Hierarchy of Skepticism. He starts to just address the skeptics straight up, straight on. But a lot of them didn't want to move. They'd been jerked around by Apple for over a decade, and developers were like, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you're actually going to stick to one single software strategy, because they'd been screwed over so many times. So what he did a ceremony. He said a vow. He unfurled a large piece of parchment paper, and in it he had a manifesto, a promise. And he read a vow and a promise to the developers. We will stick to one single software strategy. More developers got on board. By the time he's just biting at the bit, because he had this bigger vision for Mac OS 10, he was getting sick of the straggler developers, and he thought, what do I need to do? And he thought, you know what? I need to bury the old operating system. So he did just that. He held a funeral. Like literally, I know the person that was under the stage with the scuba gear when the smoke came out. So smoke comes up, a coffin comes up, and he walks out with an oversized box of Mac OS 9, and he does a eulogy. There's stained glass on the window, eerie music plays, and he eulogizes. We are here today to mourn the passing of Mac OS 9. He is now in that great bit bucket in the sky, no doubt looking down upon us with that very single smile he displayed every time he booted. He does the eulogy, shuts the lid, puts a rose on it. Mr. Jobs never, ever mentioned Mac OS 9 again. It was dead to him. The developers knew at that moment. You can hear the audio in the audience. It's kind of fun. They knew it was over. An ending had happened, so a beginning could be new again. And we need to actually understand our constituents. We call them your travelers. You need to understand the needs of your travelers in a way so you're using the right tools to communicate so they want to come along with you into your future. Because the interesting thing about the past is it clings to them. Like you can jump up and move on as the entrepreneur, but they're just clinging to something ancient and old, and sometimes you need to demarcate. That's not the way it is anymore. We've all moved on. And ceremony is a great way to do it. But the other interesting thing you have to realize is in your entrepreneurial story, you're not Luke Skywalker. You are not the hero. Your travelers are the hero. That's your customers, your employees. They're the hero. So you need to understand mental models for empathy. Entrepreneurs are so fixated on the future, we struggle to be present. We use the future as an escape sometimes. And to be empathetic, you need to be here and you need to be now, coming from an expert. So really, what this S-curve is you're moving from what is to what could be, and you need to use the lens of empathy to do that. So all your dreaming, everything needs to be done empathetically. So this model I'm going to show you is going to become a model for how you need to use your own journey of innovation as an epic tale. So the beginning of any innovation movement starts off with a dream. So you have a dream, and then you need to get your travelers to leap. This is what it feels like to them when you launch a big change. They're like, some people are like, balls to the walls, they're jumping in, and others are like, I am so not going there. So you need to tell motivating tales and warning tales to get them to go there. That's the beginning of your great story, but this is the messy middle. This is when you need to empathetically think about, what is my idea doing to everyone else? And how's it screwing up their life? How much more time am I asking from them? How much money am I asking for them? How hard is it going to be? Because once they jump in, it's going to be a fight, and then they hit the climb. Now, in storytelling, Joseph Campbell did some analysis. There's 18 actual steps in a really great story. One of those steps is in the climb phase. This is when they get so exhausted. The protagonist does something. They do what's called, they go to their inmost cave, and what they do is they decide, do I want to keep going or do I want to give up? In every famous movie and story, there's this moment where you're like, they're going to keep going? He's going to Sauron? Oh my God. You're like, There's a moment that your employees, your customers, they go in their inmost cave and they're like, do I want to keep climbing? So you need to understand what your declaration of your dream looks like to the people you're communicating to, because it looks hard. And you need to communicate from that pit sometimes and understand what's going on, and then eventually you arrive. I call it arrival. I didn't call it a celebration. It's an arrival. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, and when you arrive, you need to reflect. It's a moment of reflection. Collect the stories that happen, pick the ones that need to be decommissioned, harvest the ones that need to push your organization forward. So once you know where you're at in the journey, each one of those stages requires a different kind of moment from its leader. In the dream phase, you need to create a moment of inspiration. In the leap phase, a moment of decision. In the fight phase, a moment of bravery. In the climb phase, a moment of endurance. And in the arrival phase, if this was clicking, a moment of reflection. You have to know what they need, and you need to give it to them, or they're going to opt out. When they go to the inmost cave, they're going to opt out of your journey. It's your job to keep them in the game, and it's all solely based on how you communicate. Dang. So if this is the journey, and you're supposed to use speeches, stories, and ceremonies to communicate, you're going to do that all the time. One-on-ones, you're going to tell a story. In your all-hands meeting, you're going to maybe give this rally cry speech. Ceremonies all the time, but you need to figure out, where are the moments when I need to have a heightened sense of creating something amazing? So there's an anthropologist named Emil Durkheim, and he actually studied gatherings of people. He actually studied religious gatherings, and he realized there was definitely something otherworldly communicated. He called it collective effervescence. When a bunch of people are getting together and collectively doing something good, it actually alters the atmosphere, but it only happens when the people are in the room together. So there's moments in your transformation. There's moments when you're growing your business. There's moments when you're building something great that you need to pause and be like, uh-oh, it's not about me right now. What kind of cathartic release does my collective team need? And you need to pluck those moments out and make those moments amazing for your people. Because stasis is death. You can't stand still. So my own organization goes through the same thing. We've been in the Valley 28 years. I am one of the legendary work mules in the Valley that's made a lot of other people billions of dollars. But I've been through 8 reinventions, 8 in 28 years, which is interesting to me because that means about every 4 years we're reinventing ourselves. The U.S. Bureau of Statistics states that most small businesses close their doors within 5 years. So is that a little fascinating to feel compelled to alter complete strategies, even services, everything, every 4 years? So just right when you think you've nailed it and you're like, we've arrived, you're re-dreaming or you're going to be dead, because stasis, standing still, is death. It's like a body of water that sits too long will turn into foul rot. So you need to constantly be infusing your organization with reinvention so you can keep going. So I love this valley. It's been good to me. You know, I came in here, I have no degree. I have that 1 year of college, though Cisco paid for me to get an MBA from UCLA, which is kind of cool. They've been a great client. But my father-in-law used to come here and pick vegetables and fruit. You just walk around the Silicon Valley, you could pick fruit right off the tree. It used to just be covered with orchards, just covered and covered with orchards. And before this place was ever called the Silicon Valley, it was called the Valley of the Heart's Delight, because the fruit was just there for the picking, and it just seemed so plentiful. So if you think about that, it still is the Valley of the Heart's Delight. But the things that we pick now are brilliant ideas. It's ideas for the picking to meet our heart's delight, which is so lovely. It's just so lovely. But an idea means you're asking people to change. It means they'll never be the same again. So being a leader that knows how to communicate empathetically in a season of change is going to be the most powerful tool that you can have, because that's what your idea is. You are asking your employees, you're asking the world to adopt an idea that had never been considered. So, as the leader, clicker, you're supposed to illuminate the path. So we actually call the leader in my book Illuminate, that I guess I'll be signing later, we call them a torch bearer. And the reason we call that leader a torch bearer is if you think about the situations under which you need a torch, it's usually dark, maybe you're in a cave, it might be scary, I don't know, it always seems like it's damp, I don't know why. But a torch only illuminates enough of a space to dissipate this much fear and gets people to go, I'll do that. Oh, I can do that, right? And they can see. Your job's to see 2 miles out. They're only to see the next few steps they're supposed to do. And the way you light their path is through the stories you tell, the speeches you deliver, and the ceremonies you conduct, makes them want to jump in and be part of something great that you're building. So I'll close with a quote, and I love this quote. It says, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up people together to collect wood, and don't assign tasks and work, but rather teach them to long for the endless immensity of the sea. That's what stories do. They suspend your disbelief. They knock fear out of your mindset, and they let you dream. And they help you long for something different and help you long for a better future. So I want to thank you. You guys have been great. Thanks for the time. Thanks.
Thank you so much. That was incredible. I couldn't even take notes on that. It was so much incredible content. And that's why Nancy's book will be for sale in the lobby. It's the book Illuminate. So you guys can go out there, pick up a copy of it. I'm looking forward to reading it as well so that all that can sink in. There's so much wisdom there. And we hope that you have enjoyed our time together. Our time is coming to a close. But before it does, I want to take this moment to just celebrate. We have some heroes this evening who've been here, who've been working. First of all, we can thank Steins for the incredible beer. I don't know where Ted is, but thank you guys so much for that. And I thought I was having just a thought. That would be a really cool way to do church on Sunday morning, wouldn't it? Just have extra beer and drink beer during church. So maybe this weekend we'll do that. And also, we have an incredible team of workers who've been here. They're part of what we call our dream team here at South Bay. They serve in lots of different capacities. Many of them took work off today to be a part of this. Can we thank them for their hard work, service? Thank you guys so much for being here this evening and using your time to serve and to be a part of this incredible event. And then lastly, we just want to let you know, if you are our guest, you've never been to South Bay before, we are here in the community to serve you as an entrepreneur, as a leader, and we would love to help you in any way that we can. In fact, to not be pushy, but just to make an invitation, Actually, this weekend, we're going to be starting a teaching series called Echo that piggybacks off a lot of the topics that we've discussed in the conference today. And it's about how to make your work count. So we'd love to invite you to join us. All the information is on the back of the sheet that you receive when you walk in. So you can just flip that over, and it'll give you more details, our website, anything that you have questions about, you can go there. And then we'll be starting some meetups that are focused more on entrepreneurship and leadership. There's small gatherings together of 10 to 15 entrepreneurs, swap ideas, encourage each other, and we'd love to invite you to be a part of that. So there's info on your sheet for that. And we are so grateful that you invested your time here today. We'd love to get a chance to hang out with you in the lobby for the after party. I think there's still some beer here, and we'll have fun together. Thank you guys again for being here. Have a great evening.